When I thought I was free, I was actually up against this hell. And I promise you, Otabek, it was hell. 7 years of my life, I was in hell.
Elena, thanks for coming. I am very excited to have this episode. You are a multiple award winner. You are a keynote speaker. You are one of the 50 influential people in UK tech. What would you say to those people who are watching you and think it's impossible for someone to achieve these many things?
But the road to that success is not easy, and it's not a smooth one by any means. One day I'm going to leave Uzbekistan, I'm going to go and do something phenomenal and work in the UN. He told me, so you basically have two choices. You either stay with me here or I'm going to send you back and I'll make sure you will never, ever get a job. I will tell all of them that you are a prostitute. Literally, this is the best way to get a job. Yes, this was so powerful, but imagine me at the age of 19 being responsible for all of these women's and their families' lives. And it was an amazing group of women, and one of them actually was disabled. And she still was able to somehow do this beautiful embroidery that they sent her pieces of work to the Queen of England.
It's an experiment. I want an AI actually ask you a question. I want you to ask one question to her about the future of AI.
That's exciting. How about this question?
That might be an issue.
Yes.
You're going to leave us alone?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Kalam. Elena, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, Otabek.
I am very excited to have this episode because although we had a lot of previous guests before, you are a rare guest that has achieved quite a lot. And I need to actually read out all of your achievements to introduce you. Elena, you are a social entrepreneur. You are an AI ethicist. You are a founder of Teens in AI. You are a multiple award winner. You are a keynote speaker. You are one of the 50 influential people in UK tech by Computer Weekly. And you have dedicated your professional life at addressing inequality, discrimination in education. And I think the list goes on.
Yes.
How would you describe yourself? How would you introduce yourself to the people who are watching you? In a simple word.
Simple words. I am just a girl going about the world, trying to make this world a better place to live in. I think that's it, really simply.
And the reason why you are here in our podcast is you are originally from Uzbekistan. Your journey is quite exciting. You obviously started your career in Uzbekistan, but you have been in many different and interesting places like Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Balkans, Europe, and you worked in many international companies as well, British Council, World Bank, USAID, and etc. The people who might be watching us might say, wow, that's a great achievement that I may never achieve. What would you say to those people who are watching you and think it's impossible for someone to achieve these many things?
Well, I think it's possible. It takes a lot of time, a lot of pain as well, because you never know who you meet on that journey. For us women in particular, I think there is a lot of effort in trying to get anywhere, really, in this day and age. Whether you come from Uzbekistan or from the UK, we see women marginalized in so many different ways. So there are a lot of very successful women out there, but the road to that success is not easy, and it's not a smooth one by any means. So, and mine wasn't either. So living Uzbekistan when I was only 19, 20, and getting married really early, and then traveling from one country to another with a young child, trying to complete my degree, and then doing another one, and then leaving my marriage because it just wasn't working anymore, and coming into London as a single mom, having another child, being a mom of 2 kids, completing my master's, realizing that, following what I thought was my dream to be in peace and conflict and development was really not something I was passionate any longer, because I guess I realized how controversial that world was, the world of UN and World Bank and international development. So I felt a lot closer to the cause of education, and that's where I felt this is where I can make a difference in the world in a way that I hope is going to make a lasting change and transform many lives, and that's what I pursued for the last 10 years.
So your journey begins in Uzbekistan, in Bukhara, from what I know.
Yes, I'm from Bukhara, so very small town. Everyone knows if you're from Uzbekistan, but I often tell my network that it's a very small, magical town, very ancient. And it's not something I ever expected coming from a very small town like this, that I would ever end up traveling the world and doing the work I was doing. And my background, my upbringing was really very much in the museum where my mom worked. I sometimes describe it as Alice in Wonderland. So those times when you're kind of wondering what's around you, what's happening. And I was just very fortunate, I guess, when I was only 9, I think, when I started learning English, and my mom said, you have to learn how to speak English so that you can understand what's happening around you. So we used to spend most weekends in the museum where my mom worked, in the archives. And of course, as my mom worked, we have to occupy ourselves. So we would just run around the museum, say hi to people, try to make conversations. I honestly cannot imagine letting my daughter do this. Imagine sending her to like a natural history museum. I'll be working and you just walk around, explore it. It doesn't sound safe, but I think in those days it was like I was just wandering around the museum, and there would be foreigners who would want to take a picture. Again, like super unheard of these days. How would you safeguarding in children? But they would try to make a conversation, and what's your name? What do you do? And I just realized, wow, there is that other language, other world out there that I have nothing, no knowledge of. And I felt like learning how to speak English was a door to somewhere beyond my dreams. And I guess in our family, I have my brother and my sister, and out of all 3 of us, I was the only one that followed my mom's advice. She said, learn how to speak English. This will be your breadwinner. And it's true. I think I started earning since I was about 14, first teaching English to my dad's friends' kids. And then I remember a museum asked if I could translate the labels. So all of the museum labels were in Russian. And I got the whole list, and I started translating it into English. So I don't know whether they still have those labels, but if they do, then I'm super proud of the fact that my translations are still there in the museum, because obviously now everything is probably in 2 or maybe even 3 languages, right? So, and then of course, foreigners would come in, and we don't have enough tour guides, and they would say, oh, does your daughter, is she free this weekend? Because we have this ambassador, American ambassador, and we can't find somebody to take him around. And I'm like, oh, American ambassador, I don't even know who these people are. I was only 14, 15, or maybe 16 by then. And and I just had this incredible opportunity to meet some really pretty cool people. I thought they were super cool in those days. And how often do you meet an ambassador or somebody who works at the UN or somebody who works in some, cool international organization? And, and everyone was really passionate about doing their work and being in Uzbekistan and contributing to community development or crafts or business. So I was just really fortunate. I was surrounded by some really amazing people. Who I think just conversations with them have left this lasting impression on me, and probably were the foundations, the building blocks of what I started perceiving of the world outside. So I was this very curious person who was very hellbent and very persistent and determined. One day I'm going to leave Uzbekistan, I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to save the world, I'm going to bring world peace, and, you know, that was the dream.
Where is that coming from? I mean, as a young child who's growing up in a quite historic place, who has opened up the world through the language, where is that I'm going to explore the world and going to save the world kind of feeling came from?
I don't know. Maybe the books I was reading, you know, maybe it's my grandma who spent many, many years in the charity sector, also translating and interpreting for those who are hard of hearing, so like sign language and whatnot. Maybe it's stories from another grandma who suffered in the war, you know, and was a survivor. I don't really know, but it just always felt like there was something very big out there, and I really wanted to be part of it. So I didn't want to settle for anything less. I didn't want to stay and become a teacher or accountant or tour guide or whatnot. I just knew one day I'm going to leave Uzbekistan, I'm going to go and do something phenomenal and work in the UN. That was my dream, I think, in those days. I wanted to do something,
And you have achieved that dream?
Kind of, yes. I was interpreting for some people in the British Council. I remember there was a really interesting project to do with the revival of crafts in Bukhara. So everything that I see these days coming from Uzbekistan into UK, I'm so proud of the fact that I contributed in a really small part, because I was only 18, 19 at that time. But I remember my first sort of introduction to the world of business and crafts, and just was when I was only 18, 19, maybe even 17, I think. I was interpreting for consultants at the British Council, and their job was to revive the cultural heritage and bring back the scarves. Yes. And, you know, because all of this stuff was really, really forgotten in the Soviet times, you know, all of the culture was kind of almost forgotten and shut down. And there was this person who then became my husband, who just, his mission was, I'm just going to explore and see what we can do to revive that beautiful culture. So he used to spend many, many days and weeks in museums studying art and culture and everything, because that was his background. And he brought some of the best consultants from London, from Gucci, from, London School of Arts and Fashion. And he said, you know what, in Uzbekistan, there is this amazing potential to revive these beautiful, artifacts and turn them into something that people will want to buy. So the first project started in Bukhara, and I just happened to be an office manager in that craft center. It's like really in the middle of the old town. And I was just working in the office, typing things and interpreting and whatnot. And then these two people walk in and they say, we're here to speak to craftsmen. Can you help us with translations? Because I heard you speak English. I'm like, yeah, sure. So, and that's kind of how I started helping that project, and had no idea that apparently, we have lost so much during the times of the Soviet Union and the Russian occupation, and us being part of something that kind of we've lost all the heritage and all of the culture. And there were only a few people in Bukhara even who were still continuously making things by hand. And so the purpose of that project was really, how can we make more of this, and how can we train others how to create these scarves? How do you create the pattern ikat? It's not just painting, right? It's a lot of woven threads. It's a lot of beautiful processes that are handmade, the handmade looms. I remember those many, many looms that were set up in that craft center. And they brought this incredible guy who hardly spoke any Russian or English, nothing. He was just from some village in Fergana. They brought him over, and he had to spend something like 6 months or 8 months in Bukhara teaching people how to weave, And these were really early days. We're talking 1998, 1997, so those really early days.
And those were exciting times as well. The country has become recently independent. It is opening up to the world. And I think, do you think that has contributed to your excitement about opportunities throughout the globe? And
well, for me, I kind of, when we became independent, I was quite small. I think I was only 11. So I was very young. I remember I kind of made up my mind when I was very young, I'm just going to stick with Russian and English, because obviously Uzbek first was introduced as a second language. I think I learned some Uzbek, but I don't remember it anymore. I was just learning to pass the tests, I suppose. But conversationally wise, I wasn't really surrounded, probably by enough of the language, because everyone just spoke Russian still. So, and it was a really interesting transition for the country. It was really tough. And I remember as a family, in the first few months or years, there was very little on the table for breakfast. I remember in the summer we would have bread and grapes. And grapes was a sweetener, right? And tea. So bread, grapes, tea. My parents couldn't afford to buy anything because we were in the situation where mom and dad wouldn't get paid for month and month. And so, for 6 months you don't have a salary, and then you're really, really stuck and worried, because you have a family of 3 kids, grandma who lived with us as well, and them. So it was super tough times. So it was difficult. Conversations at the table were always about were the days before better than what we're experiencing now. So it was really interesting conversations. But there was always that hope, just a transitionary period, like every country has to go through these cycles of, and the hope was still that, we're going to get through this and everything will be fine. So when one day I remember I was giving a tour to some foreign group of tourists, somebody gave me a tip of $100, and for somebody who was only 15 or 16, and he said, I'll give you this something in your hand. I'll put something in your hand, and you just go home and promise me you're not going to open your hand until you go home. Okay, fine, that's fine. And I walked in. I'm like, Mommy, I think he paid me. She's like, oh, really? And I'm like, yes. I opened my hand, and there was this $100 note. And when you're 15, and that's like 1995, a $100 note. So I managed to get my mom her coat and winter boots and other stuff. And I think it lasted for quite a while, because when you convert it and you exchange it, and it was a lot of money in those days.
How did you feel about that?
I felt really proud. I'm like, wow, I'm only 15 and I've managed to earn this much money, So it was really nice to be able to do this. And I thought, wow, okay, so if I carry on, with my English, and as my mom said, it will open up so many doors, maybe amazing things will happen. And so I just carried on, participated in one Olympiad after another, winning and sometimes not winning, because there was this Turkish school that suddenly opened up in Bukhara that were just our competition, because we had a specialist school. I was very lucky. My mom really wanted us to go to a specialist English school. So we didn't just have 1 hour of English per week. We had probably 2, maybe 3 hours. We had foreigners like Peace Corps volunteers who would come in every year. We had a new person. So that kind of also gave us so much exposure, because they would come in with lots of stories about the rest of the world. They would bring in that Economist or the Time magazine, and I would just flick through and read and see what's happening around the world. And I think all of that kind of contributed to where I really wanted and where I saw myself ending up. And I thought, it's definitely not going to be Uzbekistan. I definitely want to be out there exploring and really learning about what else is happening out in the world.
I believe that the characters that bring people to who they are now are built up early on when they are young. Yeah. So what characters do you think you have developed early on at those periods of your time that you have described that has contributed to who you are now?
Probably a real focus and perseverance. Like when some of my friends would go and maybe spend time in disco parties or like out and about and friends and whatnot, I just stayed indoors most of the time. It's not something I recommend, but for me that was my thing. I was in books, reading, studying. I remember we had this very specialist class that was about to set up, and I was super competitive. So I thought, I really need to get into that specialist class. So out of 3 classes, they just put together the what they thought were the brightest kids in this entire year group. So those who would have most subjects in English. So again, like a specialist English school, and we had the best English teacher, Tamara Mihailovna, who was like really the most incredible teacher, who spoke this very beautiful, very authentic, classic British English that I thought every English person has, that accent. And I was a bit surprised when I came to England and I heard so many accents. But I was very lucky. She was amazing, and she let me borrow a book called Happy English. I still have it probably at home unless my mom got rid of it. But it was the first book, and I literally read it from the very first page to the very last page. It was thick like that. And it was very introductory, but it had some very basic conversational English and very basic grammar. And I did it all by myself in 2 months, independently with no tutor, because I was so determined I needed to get into that class. And then in September, they were testing and assessing, and I was so happy they picked me into that specialist class. And I thought, that's amazing. But of course, I wouldn't be in that class if I actually didn't put in a lot of hard work. And when my friends were out and said, Ilona, come and play, I'd be like, no, I have to sit and do this work. And so I just found the time and persevered and said a lot of no's to a lot of people. And I think that was my goal. And I think as soon as I got into that class, my goal was to stay at the very top, so top of the 2-3% of the class. And I kind of maintained that until I saw some new boy that came into the class and said, let's just see how long you will stay at the very top. So I was very competitive. So I would not have anyone else, be better than me at grammar or at English grammar or, British English language grammar or anything else. So whatever subject I picked, I really wanted to be top of the class and better. Maths was probably not my forte. It's definitely something, that I wasn't really, it was a solid 4. I think in England that would be a solid 5, because I don't really rate the system here as same quality as what we had. But and PE, I guess I just had to walk and still hope that I would get a good grade, because I always thought PE, like, why do we even have PE as a class? Why, when we have so many books to study and so many really cool things to learn? Why am I playing basketball today? So, yes, you can imagine my teacher would come to my PE teacher and say, please, I know she doesn't like to run and she's not the strongest of jumpers and doesn't do that 60 meters in 6 seconds. She does it in 11 seconds, but can you please give her a 5, just because she does so many other amazing things. And I was what do you call them, starosta in English,
like the class leader.
So I was one of those every year, and they would pick me, and I was so I kind of had those leadership skills, competitiveness and perseverance and focus in whatever I do from the very early stage, even like from year 1, the first class. I think teachers could see that I was like super determined. Like, you give her any challenge and she'll just get it done. So one of those.
You finish your school, your journey of exploring the world begins. So how, explain me the journey you had from Bukhara all the way to now London.
It's a long journey,
It's a long journey, but it's a very interesting journey.
Yes. So in Bukhara, obviously, it was popular at that time to pick economics. So I picked economics. So I thought, okay, if I study English and economics, I'll be okay in the world. So economics was a very popular one, although people said, Elena, just go and study languages. I'm like, why? I already speak English. It was pretty decent at that time. And I'm like, I'm going to study something else and then combine it, right? Which is kind of these days, I always tell kids, okay, combine your passionate subject plus AI. So for me, it was like passion for economics, because I studied it already in high school. We had some foreign teachers teaching this, and I'm like, this is a really cool called Malaysian Faculty. And I'm like, okay, sounds pretty cool. And I was told everything is in English, Elena. All subjects are in English and they're taught by some top professionals. I'm like, okay, why is it called Malaysian? It was my first question. But they said, well, there was this partnership and ta-da-da. And I saw quite a few students who were very keen to apply. Some of them were my friends. And I thought, maybe I'll try. And so I tried, and I got in. And prior to this, I actually tried to get into what is it called? UWED, I think.
University of World Economics and Diplomacy, yes.
Diplomacy.
It was one of the top universities at
that
the
was
time.
the first choice I actually had straight after school. But unfortunately, I had a sponsor lined up in Bukhara. There was a company who said, if you get in, we're going to cover your fees and your, all of your tuition, and we'll cover the expenses for you to live in Tashkent. And then when you finish, you'll come and work in our company. I'm like, okay, fine, good deal. For 2-3 years, I'll do that, and then I'll still pursue my dreams. But unfortunately, they pulled out last minute, and a couple of people who they promised to fund, we were quite disappointed. And of course, me coming from a pretty normal family, my dad was just a driver, an ambulance driver in a hospital. So he kind of like an emergency A&E driver. And my mom was just a museum worker in the archives. So pretty normal family without any business or anything background. So they kind of told me, well, Aliona, we have to do something else then. You have to come back to Bukhara and we'll have to think of a plan B. So I was really upset and I was crying, and I thought, that was my one chance, I really wanted to get into that uni. I didn't get in, and so my whole year was like work experience, like a gap year. And I thought, what am I going to do? So it was a really cool experience, actually, a year of not studying, but actually meeting a lot of really interesting people through my work. So I immediately got into that craft center in Bukhara as an office manager, and that gave me a lot of insights into the world of work, real world of work, working until midnight sometimes as well, because kind of in Uzbekistan at that time, particularly the person I worked for, she thought it was quite okay. Now it is almost like modern day slavery, right? I would never have my team work beyond 5. I'm like, okay, you have to all go. That's it. We sign off today. 5 o'clock it tops. But I was very young and I had no idea, what my rights are, what my human rights are, and what I can work until. And my mom would come and pick me up. Oh, you're still working, and you shouldn't be working. She would tell, the CEO, my daughter shouldn't really be working until that late, like 11 o'clock, and she's still typing in front of the laptop. But for me, this was fun. I was only 18. Just finished school, and I was like, I can do many hours. I can even work throughout, all night. If only I had my laptop or a computer at home, I promise you, I would probably not even be coming out of that, because there was so much to do, and it was exciting for me. I was learning how to type, right? It's not something that they taught in schools. Yeah, so we didn't really have laptops or computers. So even how to type, it was like, it's a skill to learn. How to operate Excel or Word, PowerPoints and things like that, So I was learning a lot of amazing things. And at the same time, because the office also had a lot of foreigners coming in every now and then, the craftsman needed an interpreter. So I'd go I need to help somebody sell. So I was kind of learning not only how to interpret, but also how to sell, because I was effectively selling on their behalf. And I'll be telling the story of that incredible craftsman or craftswoman who's making these amazing things. So I knew literally everything about them, and I knew everything about what they're making and how they're making. So I would literally take all of these foreigners around this craft center. And of course there are, metal chasing, and there is, making of scarves, and there is everything. And I almost became an expert in every single craft, and be able to tell the story. And everyone was selling super well. So on the back of my storytelling, I had no idea at that time that those skills would be so valuable. This is your pitching, this is your marketing skills, you're selling, you're literally pitching all the time, right? So, but I was just doing it very naturally, with no background, nothing. I just spoke English, and I was just happy to help. That's it. So so I kind of spent this whole year doing this, and it was amazing, the amount of people I met, the conversations I've had. And then I got into Bukhara University to study economics. And a year later, I thought, okay, well, this is my only other opportunity to get into Tashkent through this Malaysian University Faculty in that technical university, I think it was, or technology university, or something like that.
Within the technical university,
yeah.
Yes.
Now, if I end up in Tashkent, I wouldn't even know how to get there. Such a long time ago. So yes, it was pretty cool. I got in, and there were 100 of us. So 100 every year. They would only take 100 students. So I got into that 100. It was for free, so it was on a scholarship, because I think they had like a set percentage of students who they would take on a scholarship, and then there will be a percentage probably like private. I would not be able to afford a private, so I was on a scholarship. And I was super happy because I thought, wow, I'm in Tashkent. Wow, what can you like, what better would you want from like somebody who's only 18, 19? And I immediately connected to everyone. I think that's probably another power skill, networking. So I immediately connected by email with quite a few people who I met as I was a tour guide. So I got in touch with the British Council, got in touch with Peace Corps. And I don't just get in touch with people, I get in touch with directors because I gave a tour to a director of Peace Corps. So I'm like, hey, I can't remember his name. I am in Tashkent. Can I help? What can I do? Can I come and volunteer? Because for me, I always believed in the first foot step in the door, any door, is through volunteering. Like literally, this is the best way to get a job. Because you go in, you show them how amazing you are, and they, of course, take you if you're amazing, if you can show them that you can do all these amazing things. So I'm like, okay, so I'm just going to get in touch with everyone I know, because Tashkent is a big place, and I had no idea who was where. And I'll just tell them that I'm here. And if they have any opportunities for me, I'm sure, they'll tell me. And somehow, maybe because I left a lasting impression on them, they remembered me. And I was like, oh my God, they actually remembered me. And so I got British Council director who said, Elena, do you remember Michael? You translated for him. He's actually coming back into the country in 6 months. You should definitely connect because he's got some projects going on, because there is opportunities for you to translate and do some work. I'm like, okay, fine, tick, right? And then Peace Corps volunteering, I just went and volunteered, 1 day per week or something like that. So I got myself involved in this. So I had quite a few hands in a few pies. And that's kind of me. I will not just go and study. I'm just going to go and study, and I'm going to have lots of other things that I'll get myself involved.
So you're quite comfortable to leave your comfort zone to...
Oh, 100%. I had to learn how to do it. It had, to begin with, I think it was a bit scary, kind of sending an email to somebody and saying, hi, I'm here. And then I'm like, oh, that was a positive response. Maybe I'll try it again. And so I managed to get into contact with that person, Michael, who then became my husband, and said, Michael, I'm here. You said to me, if I ever come to Tashkent, I should get in touch with you because maybe, you have a job for me. So I'm like straight in. I'm like, I need a job because I'm in Tashkent. It's expensive here. So, and he's like, okay, fine. So let's just see what I've got. And he said, well, I've got a project in Karakalpakstan, Nukus. I would have to take you out there because I need somebody who will translate, but also manage that project because I'm only here every few months, and then I have to leave the country, and I need to leave somebody who speaks excellent English and can also understand the entire game of taking the stuff that they produce in Nukus, bringing it to Tashkent, supplying all tourist shops with all of the stuff, making sure it sells, taking all the cash, the money, and taking it back to Nukus. Do you think you can do that? I'm like, yeah, for sure, I can do anything. So that was my first gig. So I was studying.
You were not worried, you're not concerned whether you will be, there was no imposter syndrome or anything like that. You just went straight to it. I just
And
where is that confidence coming from?
I don't know. Probably because I was a starosta.
Right.
From age 7 until 18. I'm like, I was just used to getting people to follow and ask them what needs to be done, and they would just do it. I was just so used to having that, ability to draw people into whatever I was doing, and they would just follow. And it happens every day, even today. So, and it was a really interesting thing. And when he suggested this thing to me, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go to Karakalpakstan. I've never been there. But I've always wanted to see, it's Aral Sea and it's historical and everything else. And of course, it was a really, really interesting experience. So he paid for all the expenses. And of course, I had a wage. So I was super happy. I was able to live in Tashkent and not obviously I would still live in the dorm, but at least I didn't have to worry, whether I will be able to buy something, because I didn't really see myself being dependent on my mom and dad for too long, because I felt like, they shouldn't be sending me the money because I should be able to find a way. That was always my drive. And so as soon as that opportunity came, I'm like, wow, this is exciting. And it's British Council. It's not just something. And so I traveled to Nukus, and it was a really sad experience, I will be honest. I actually felt like I lived in a bubble for many years. So at the age of 18, I come into, or 19, I come into this place where I have not seen that kind of level of poverty, because I thought, wow, where we are, and my family is also, middle class and everything. And we suffered, but I haven't seen that kind of suffering until I saw that. And I was like, wow, I felt like I've lived in like a bubble, things have been happening in a really good way. And and suddenly I'm encountering this family who the only thing they can put on the table is dry bread, and they only have this tiny little lamp hanging from the ceiling, and they burnt all of their furniture because that's the only way to keep themselves warm. And I think that kind of struck me, because I felt like something definitely is happening in a way where I just felt really sad, and I felt like I need to help, I need to do something. What can I do? And the project that we were involved in was super interesting for me in particular, because I was learning so much. So we were again developing these local crafts with the very local flavor of Karakalpakstan. So they have specific colors, they have specific embroidery and whatnot. And all of the inspiration came from these beautiful museums and archives, and the stuff that a normal foreigner wouldn't even see, because it's all still kind of waiting to be uncovered. And I remember also spending some time just looking and observing and seeing what the history had to offer that we have just forgotten and let go of, right? Not because we want it, but because the times of those times have suggested that was the game we had to play. And it was super sad to kind of see the families that have been kind of affected by the drying Aral Sea. The sea was disappearing. That impacted a lot of families. The entire community was impacted because they couldn't do any fishing. They couldn't really survive as they normally would, because during the good times they had plenty of water, plenty of fish, and the industry was thriving. I think from what I remember, if I remember correctly, reading back in the day, that this entire small region was able to supply so many other parts in Uzbekistan, but also around Central Asia. So we were literally supplying the tinned fish and whatnot. And I was like, wow, this is kind of phenomenal. So what happened? Of course, the Aral Sea became dried out, and the salt, the dryness has caused a lot of disease. But most importantly, also, the families have lost their livelihoods, right? And that was kind of what the aim of the project was. How can we revive the livelihoods, or how can we provide alternative livelihoods to the families? If they can't do fishing, what can they do? And we're talking to families who are 40s, 50s, 60s. It's really difficult at that age to kind of learn something completely new. And I remember working with this group of 20 women. So it was a female empowering project, which is why, again, I felt like it was so powerful, being surrounded by these women, and everyone's story was incredible. They were all from age, 25, 30 to all the way to 50s, 60s. And it was this amazing group of women, and one of them actually was disabled. So I don't know what exactly her disability was, but her hands were completely like twisted like this, right. Twisted, yeah. And she still was able to somehow do this beautiful embroidery. It was so incredible that they sent her pieces of work to the Queen of England, and she received a response from the Queen of England telling Amazing. Her just how impressed and just how beautiful this piece of work was, despite the disability that she had. So I felt like entrepreneurship had a very rehabilitating effect on those women, and not only on those women, but everyone. So we kind of go through this incredible process of realization that you can do anything. And that for that woman, I think it was the realization that she could do this embroidery, sell it, make a living, and be proud of the fact that she's not dependent on the state. She can actually make a living.
Despite the physical, social, economical.
Yes, this was so powerful. But imagine me at the age of 19 being responsible for all of these women's and their families' lives. And I had no idea at that time that I was doing this. And I would come to Nukus, pick up all the bits and pieces. And fortunately, it wasn't too heavy because there were scarves and wallets and things like that. Bring it to Tashkent, distribute it, collect the cash, take it back. And in those days, we didn't have money or anything like that. It's a little plug, right?
Who's our sponsor, by the way?
Yeah, we didn't have those amazing fintechs where I could just, it takes us a few seconds to send money to somebody. It was all done manually, cash. So I had to be careful taking this cash back as well and make sure that, it all then gets distributed to those women it was...
Was it not difficult to balance the study and the work at that time?
Not for me, because I kind of felt like I was a superwoman even then. So for me, that was like so easy, going to lectures and because at that university they were pretty flexible as well. Like, okay, as long as you pass your exam and you're doing this studies and you go to compulsory lectures, it was okay. So most of the times, I think my least interesting or favorite subjects were like statistics. So I'm like, maybe I shouldn't go to that one because I just know I'm not very good at that. But anything related to marketing, business, because it was Faculty of Business Management. I mean, I was literally living business management at that time because I was managing a project and learning business management as I was working. So unfortunately, what my mom always remembers that, and she always tells me, you should never have done this. You should never have done this. But I don't regret it. I left the faculty because I was offered to go to France, leave the country and carry on working on some exciting projects. So that was meant to be my future husband. And he sold me this incredible dream. And, when you're 19, 20, you're like, oh my God, that's like my one window of opportunity. I would be stupid not to. And so I said to my mom, okay, I'm leaving. I want to go to France. I want to see how it goes. I think, if I don't like it, I'll come back. But if it goes okay, then I'm going to stay and I'll just figure it out. I just know I'll figure it out. And I guess my mom was really upset. She said, you should have finished that. No, you really need to finish. 1 year left. Alena, come on. 1 year. Can you not stay for a year? And no, it's boring. I already know everything. I know how to manage a business. I already am doing it. What else am I going to learn there? Nothing. It's all theoretical. It's all bullshit. So I told my mom that, and she will never forgive me for this still, that I called it, because obviously my mom is highly educated. She's got, a master's degree in geography and everything. So everyone in the family was having really high hopes. Alena, she's going to graduate. She's going to have her bachelor's degree and then a master's and a PhD. And I'm like, no, sod that. It's just not worth it. I still am a huge believer of what a waste of time universities are.
You still think?
I still think that, yes.
Right.
I really do believe that.
Despite
that
all the LSEs
experience,
and King's Colleges and everything.
Yeah, I did it like a tick box because, in order to work in the UN, you have to show that you have your bachelor's and master's and your 5 years or 10 years experience. And I'm like, I have so much more experience that I can, even by then. But I thought, okay, I'm just going to tick those boxes, mostly probably for my mom, because my mom was just so worried that if I don't have that, what's she called? Korachka.
Yes, piece of paper.
Piece of paper.
Yeah.
You're just going to go nowhere. And I'm like, oh, Mom, things are a bit different now. And and I thought, okay, well, I will do this just in case if one day I'm like in a position where they literally only look at that. And I promise you these days, nobody looks at that. And we can talk about that separately. But yes, in those days, I kind of said, oh, well, I'm just going to go. So, and I think the arrangement was I was going to come to France for just like a month, try it, because I always wanted to kind of give myself that choice. If I absolutely hate it, I'll just go back. That's fine, because even if I can't go back to my university, I kind of told them I'm going, but maybe I'll come back. So I'm not like cutting all ties completely. So I kind of spoke to my dean and I said, I'm going to just explore and see what happens. And he was fine with that. And I thought, okay, even if I come back and if things go wrong, I'll still have some opportunities like British Council. Of course, they will have me because I'm such a clever person. UN, and I kind of always knew that I'll make it here. And so I kind of left. I took that risk. Obviously, my parents were worried because, you're going with that foreigner, what if something happens and all that. And I just come in, and it was south of France. And it was beautiful. And I was a bit shocked, actually, when I came in. I'm like, I've just been to Nukus, Karakalpakstan, where there is so much poverty and deprivation. And it was so sad to see these families suffer in a way that they shouldn't have suffered, And I'm like, and now I'm in this place called south of France with Monaco, Monte Carlo, Nice. And everyone has like their super cool cars and yachts. And these mansions of houses, and
so it's from one extreme to another.
Yeah, how can it be that in one place you have nothing, like literal poverty? And I don't know what's worse. That time I was trying to also figure it out. When you have everything, and then in one day you lose everything, which is kind of how I perceived the situation in Karakalpakstan, because these guys have had so much, and then suddenly, due to no fault of their own, they just lose everything. And imagine the psychological impact of this, and how it must have felt to have everything and then to lose everything in such a short space of time. And I couldn't really imagine that. And so when I saw all of the wealth, and I'm like, why is that? Is that really even necessary to have that much? Why isn't there some form of like, I don't know, how can we spread the wealth, some balance? Yes. And I just couldn't understand how can it be. So for me, this was like one of those strange places that I ended up. And it was beautiful and pretty, and the weather was nice. And the sea, I've never seen the sea in my life because we're double landlocked, right? Yep. In Uzbekistan. Yeah. Oh, that's my introduction to the Mediterranean Sea. And it was really beautiful. And the people are very nice, but they're nice. They have everything. They don't really know what's happening in other parts of the world. And it kind of struck me that, well, I'm really in the wrong place, because what can I do here? Nothing. It's just a beautiful life. I'm not ready for that yet. In my mind, I felt like I don't want to stay here. And I kind of, unfortunately, also the person I met, I kind of told him, I said, look, I like it. I'll study a bit of French and I'll see whether I can find myself a fit in this part of the world. But I said, I'm not really sure this is for me. Because I come from Uzbekistan, and I've seen things, and I'm kind of, my ambition is to make the world a better place, world peace. Hello, this is like, I'm in the wrong place. And then I think I had no idea at that time. It's something I lacked from a very early age. It's probably because I didn't really socialize enough, is I didn't really have that life experience. So I couldn't really pick up on the signs that maybe another girl who had a bit more experience in life, and maybe meeting people and dating and whatnot would really pick up.
What kind of signs?
It's those little signs that you kind of realize I'm actually with the wrong person. And I kind of didn't see that at all, because the person that I saw in front of me was just my boss, somebody who just like sponsoring me to go abroad, helping me, and then, we're going to work together. And we're going to change the world together. That is kind of what I saw. But he saw things differently. And maybe he gave me some signs and I just couldn't recognize them at all, that he really saw me as his future wife. Somebody who will give him a son to carry on his family. That was really interesting.
That was not an intention in the first place when you've decided to move with him to a foreign country.
No, and he kind of laid it all out to me on the table, almost like when, in a couple of days after I arrived, he said, well, actually, I have other plans. This is my plan. I really would like, to marry you, and maybe, we could have a child, and then we could still do all these things together. And I'm like, what? You're kind of much older than me, because he was much older than me. He was like 37 years older than me. And I'm like, no, you're like my grandfather. I'm like, you're so much older than me. I don't think that's going to work. I said, and anyway, I'm not really into marriage. I really don't think I would ever have kids. And everyone in my school knew that I was not into men or anyone. Like, I was so focused on studies. And I just wanted to work and do something great for the world. That was literally all I was thinking from a very early age. So I was very fixed, like, on my goals. And you're coming into my life telling me that I'll be a wife and I'll have a kid. I'm like, I don't think that's going to happen. So I just told him, I said, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. And I kind of had no idea that the person also had this anger rages in a way that I've never seen. It's like a tantrum. I don't know. And he became so angry, and I've never seen a person becoming so angry, like a scarily angry, almost like stamping. And with his feet, it was literally like that. And he told me, you know what, I've thought about it, you know, so you basically have two choices. You either stay with me here and you do what I suggested, you know, we'll have a kid and da-da-da, or I'm going to send you back. Those were his real words. I'll send you back and I'll make sure you will never, ever get a job with any international organizations you are dreaming about. Like, forget about jobs at the UN, British Council. I will tell all of them that you are a prostitute who just came with me to France and, you know, and you're just coming back.
That's a blackmailing.
Blackmailing, I don't know, somebody said it's trafficking, it's whatever. So
Trafficking, it's wrong in so many different levels.
So many different levels. And I was really shocked. I was shocked. I was sad. I didn't know what to do, whether to cry or call the police, because I didn't speak French. And I had no friends there because his friends were his friends, and I had no contacts of anyone. And I was like, wow, I'm kind of stuck in that decision, and I'm only 20. And I was like, okay, so what am I going to do? So obviously at that time I had no idea that he was bluffing, because, you know, I'm sure if I had just told my mom and said, Mom, like, this happened, what do I do? My mom would have 100% told me, you know, Alena, just come back. Like, whatever he says, just come back and everything will be fine. But I think I was so ashamed of myself. I was literally crying, and I thought, okay, well, I just have to be strong. And if this is what he's going to do, which is like literally the end of my life, literally every dream that I've ever had literally got disseminated in those few minutes that I had the conversation with him about this. And I said, okay, fine, I'm just going to stay and I'm just going to go with the flow. What happens will happen. You know, but at least I still, even if I have to have a child, I still will do what I want to do at some point, one day, maybe not immediately. So I kind of was too ashamed and too scared of telling my mom, something I regretted for many, many years later, to kind of tell her. And I just called my mom and I said, Mom, everything is fine, don't worry. I think I'm going to stay here for a bit longer and I'll tell you how it goes. But it looks like I have talent in French, you know, I'm studying French, and then I'll see what else I'll study afterwards to finish, you know, my degree and whatnot. And I stayed, and it, to begin with, it was okay. He was respectful, you know, he was fine. But every time I would mention I want to go home, I want to see my family, you know, he would go really angry, and to the extent where he would take all my rings, all my watch, my clothes, lock this away, and say, well, if you want to do this, then I'll do this. You will have nothing. And it was like a tantrum, like a child's tantruming. It was so strange. And really angry, like super angry, abusive, and yeah.
One pattern I have observed, there were other guests who went through similar trauma, of abuse, of physical abuse, of emotional abuse, and etc., is that they regret that they were not quite vocal about it at the time, because they were scared, because they were ashamed, and etc. If you now, looking back at what you have experienced at that time, and if any of our viewers experiencing the similar situation, what you have done differently? What would you suggest to people who are experiencing similar things?
Call the police. Call the police, which is what I had to do eventually anyway. And speak to your friends and family who really care about you. And I mean, obviously, if your mom and dad are sensitive, health conditions and whatnot, be careful how you present this information, but really speak to your sister, your brother, your family, because I think that's something I regret I didn't do. And of course, if you're already familiar with the culture, so I had to do this when we came to England and when it just became already impossible for us to stay together, that I just had to call the police. But fortunately, that was in England and my English was good enough for me to speak to somebody. But there will always be somebody in the police who will be able to help, even if you don't speak the language. And I mean, in England, we're very lucky. We have so many domestic violence organizations. At that time, I had no idea it was called domestic violence. I remember in 2008, I was taken by a school teacher to Citizens Advice Bureau in England because he was keeping my passport away from me and he would just, to make sure I never leave. And I picked up a flyer on the table in Citizens Advice Bureau and it said domestic violence and it had all of the descriptions and definitions
of what you are experiencing.
Of financial abuse, emotional abuse, domestic violence is this and it's also this and it's also this. And I'm like, oh wow, I can pretty much tick every single one of these boxes except physical abuse, not in a way where he would like hit me or rape me or something like this, but you know, he threatened to kill me. Like he would hold sleeping pills in front of me and said, why don't you take all of these sleeping pills? You're just going to fall asleep, you know, and I'll just take care of Victoria. She'll be fine.
Victoria's your daughter.
Yeah. So it was kind of super scary. So I was only, 20 and I just went with the flow and I studied French. Then I became pregnant. We had Victoria. Then we realized that France just wasn't financially sustainable because he couldn't really go back to Uzbekistan and do some other work because the project ended and he was looking for other international jobs and something came into post from the Balkans. There was an offer to go to Macedonia and I said, anyway, I just want to go anywhere, just not here in France. Because I felt like, again, we were already there for nearly 2 years and I felt like it's just, what am I going to end up being? Of course, a mom, and we have a child, but south of France is very touristic and very, I would end up in hospitality, hotels, tourism, maybe a teacher if I end up getting a qualification to teach English, and that's it. And that's kind of very far from the ambitions I had. So I said, like, anyway, let's just go Africa, Balkans, Asia, Uzbekistan, like literally anywhere. Now, of course, I'm dying to go to south of France or Spain or somewhere just for a bit of more sunshine. But in those days, it just felt wrong. Like, I'm only in my 20s. I had Victoria, my daughter, when I was 22, so I was super young. And I thought, it's just the wrong place for me to be. So there is nothing happening here except beautiful life. And I wasn't ready for that. So as soon as that opportunity came, I said to him, we have to go. We have to go. He listened. And for me, this was an opportunity to get back into doing what I really love doing, which is being amongst people in the international organization. So the organization was called ACTID right at that time. Our friends from British Council who were in Uzbekistan also ended up in Macedonia. So we kind of already had some friends. Nobody, of course, knew what was happening in the family because he kept it secret and I just didn't know what was happening really. I thought it was just normal. I honestly thought at that time that's just how men are. So I had a really, probably also remembering the times with my dad and what he was like to my mom, some alcohol abuse and stuff like that. So he had that addiction to alcohol and probably still does that, and when he used to drink, he wasn't, like, he would wake us up at 2:00 in the morning to speak to me. Alona, how was your day? And I'm like, Dad, I really want to sleep. It's 2:00 in the morning. So he wasn't like abusive physically. He was just, the money that he could be spending on things, he would spend on alcohol, you know, and we kind of were always lacking because of his priorities lying elsewhere. So he was an amazing, amazing person. He could fix literally anything, and people knew that, and they would always knock on our door, or my iron needs fixing, my washing machine, my car, my this, and he would just go and fix, and they would pay him in vodka. So he had that weakness. And I kind of always seen my dad as not like the best husband to my mom, sadly. And so when these things were happening to me, I'm like, okay, that's just probably what men are like, which is an awful thing to say. But to me, that was just two men that I experienced, and that I didn't really have any boyfriends or anything like this.
That's an interesting observation. As a father of two daughters myself, I always think that I need to set the right example for their future life. I need to build the model of a man who should be respectful, who should treat them as a person, and that kind of responsibility of not being just a good husband to my wife, but to be good father to my daughters, and to set right examples so that in future they know what to demand from a man, what to expect from a man. Exactly. Do you think that would be the right thing for the man to think about in their relationship when they, especially if they have daughters?
Always. I mean, our parents are our role models, right? First role models we see, right? So for us, we kind of model our behavior on what we saw in our childhood. Sometimes I have to catch myself. Oh, I shouldn't be shouting because my mom used to shout at us, and I shouldn't be doing what my mom does because I remember how I really didn't like my mom shouting at us. So every time I raise my voice, I'm like, okay, no, I'm just going to stay chill, and I'm just going to be calm because he's going to be learning from me as well. You know, my son, who's sometimes deserves a little shout or two. Yes. And of course, yes, I think we learn so much from our parents. This is where the first initial habits are. I think they always say, you know, show me a child who is age 7 and I'll tell you what they are going to be. And of course, it's the surrounding. You know, these days I always say, if it is not your family, you know, you are the 5th person of the 4 people that surround you. So if you surround yourself with, you know, people who, I don't know, do alcohol abuse or drug abuse, it's quite likely that you're going to go down that path as well. Yeah, which is sadly the truth. Or if you're surrounded by people who don't want to go to university because in all the conversations you have or whatnot, you are likely to go. Or if you're, on the contrary, surrounded by, you know, academics, masters, PhDs, so they will again influence you by virtue of you being around them all the time. So pick your friends, right? Yeah, we can't pick our families, but of course there are lessons, you know, they learn lessons because I don't know whether you know, there is a really interesting book, I can't remember the title, but it's almost like the kids are not really your kids, they come through you, right? It's and they are there to also learn their own lessons and teach you certain lessons. So always when I look back at, you know, how things were when Victoria was young, you know, what are the lessons that I inferred, you know, what are the things that I had to go through to become the person that I am today, which is why I kind of don't regret anything that happened, although sometimes I feel like, but if I did that, how would my life turn out to be if I didn't, you know, if I called my mom or if I did this or that. But in the hindsight, of course, you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I'm just super grateful that I survived this abusive relationship, which was, I don't know, 8 years of this. And of course, us traveling from one country to another, again, kind of what was happening was every time, particularly when we were moving away from England, every time we would get the opportunity to go to Ethiopia or somewhere else, or Bangladesh, I would lose my right to become British, because there is a process, and I would kind of apply because I thought, oh, if I become British, I have more rights, I have more say, people will listen. And he would kind of almost deliberately take us away again. And every time I would come back, I would have to reapply again. So it was almost like a control thing all the time at all levels. Right. But when we came to Macedonia, I felt much freer again, because I immediately, as soon as I come into any country, I didn't have the right to work because it was my husband who worked, but I nobody could stop me from volunteering and doing so many amazing things. So I immediately got involved with British Council projects, helping young people. There was a training program I put together on entrepreneurship. I had no idea what it was, but I just figured it out, read books, spoke to people, researched things online, and I'm like, this is what they should be doing. We should be teaching kids. They were not kids; they were young university students. How they could innovate, how they could build things. And because at that time, we're talking 2002, 2003, the Balkans were also going through a really sort of shaky period, politically speaking. And there was a lot of, one country wouldn't talk to another. Kosovo wouldn't talk to Serbia, Macedonia and Albania was in a completely different space. So how do we bring all young people together? Because I really didn't care about politics at that time, although later on I studied politics, but I felt like if we could connect countries through youth entrepreneurship, magic will happen. That was my hypothesis at that time. And British Council, somehow they just said, yeah, do it. And I'm like, sure, I'll do it. And I never really asked for any money. I'm like, I'm going to do it because I think at that time, this was my way of rehabilitation as well, right. Because I was going, on the one hand, through this domestic violence that nobody even know about. Even I didn't know that what I was going through. I thought, okay, this is just normal. And at the same time, I really, really wanted to feel great about the fact that I am doing something meaningful, something purposeful. And for me, finding that purpose in life is always, always probably the most important thing. And wherever I go, I always try to find that purpose, however big or small it is. And so my daughter was very small. So Victoria was in the kindergarten. Fortunately, we could afford some childcare, so that was super nice. So that meant I was able to meet some amazing young people who were as young as me, university students, from Serbia, from Bulgaria, from Albania, from Macedonia. I think there were like 7 or 8 countries, and the whole purpose of the project was how can we connect all of these young people when countries do not talk, but there is still hope with the young people, connecting them all, and doing something very entrepreneurial. Like somebody makes things, could sell to all of these other 8 countries. So it's almost like, I think it was called Business Without Borders. Right. Maybe if you Google it, it might still be there. It was called Business Without Borders. And it was a pretty cool project. British Council sponsored and organized. They put a lot of money and time into training. And I'm pretty sure a lot of these people are probably still thriving and doing some really cool things. But that was something I really found, something that kind of kept me alive.
Would you consider yourself as entrepreneurial yourself at that times? No.
I was just like an enabler. I was just like, oh, wow, I just have the opportunity. I seem to be meeting all these people at the British Council. For some odd reason, they listen to me. I'm like, okay, I'm just lucky and grateful that they're listening to me. So my husband was amongst them, and he would always, pick my brains. And what about this? And what about that? I'm like, yeah, but what about, at that time, like right now we teach things like design thinking, AI ethics, AI and whatnot. In those days, it's about, how do you build something out of nothing? How do you make that glass? How do you whatnot? So everything was quite physical. So there was somebody who was making hats, another one. But it was really trying to instill that enterprising mindset and innovation. Technology was nowhere near, where we are right now, because we're talking 2002. Nothing like techie, not even a website. I think we did have a website maybe, but nothing more than that. It was very, very early stages. And I kind of was super proud that we just managed to get conversations going. And I noticed that when we work at the level of young people, they don't care about politics. They don't care about what mums and dads have to say in terms of, who you should vote for and what's happening in the country. All they care about is actual purpose and also being relevant to the world and doing something meaningful.
Self-realization.
There was something, yes, it's very, very innate in young people. All we have to do is just discover it, open it up, And I felt like I didn't really know at that time that I was good at, bringing people to this realization, or I was just talking and getting them to meet and say, what about this and what about that? It was super fun. I really enjoyed that. And of course, in 2 years' time, the project ended and we had to leave, and we chose to go to England. That was my first time, 2004. That was my introduction to England. I came and I heard all these many accents, and I had no idea England was so diverse. But for me, I also felt like, again, I'm in the wrong place. Like England, it's like a highly developed country, industrialized and tech and everything. I'm like, what am I going to do here? So it took kind of some time to realize that that it wasn't really for me. So England definitely wasn't for me. And we were based in Hampshire. Yeah, so super pretty as well. You know, your New Forest and everything. And I'm like, that's just isn't for me. It's too developed. I need to be somewhere where I can help and do something, because what can I do here? Who can I help? I had no idea that every country has problems, and every society and every community probably experiences things of their own that I could probably add value to. But for me at that time, I had this fixed idea. I had to go to Africa. I had to go to, East Asia or somewhere like that. So those are the parts of the world that I really wanted to see, because I'm not sure why Africa was always on my mind. Maybe that Economist I read, or an article in the Time I read or something that always, the books that I was, nurturing my mind and like a sponge kind of reading so much about some author who just literally spent her entire life in Africa amongst animals and tribes, and I thought to myself, at some point, that will be the life I would want. I would want to just go and become an anthropologist, almost like you live among the tribe and you learn from them, how do they live and how do they survive? So kind of, I thought one day maybe I could do something like this and really be somewhere in Africa amongst the animals, amongst the those authentic tribes. And as soon as an opportunity to go to Ethiopia came, I'm like, oh my God, I jumped. I'm like, let's go to Ethiopia and spend like as much time as we possibly can. Again, it was a 2-year project with us, and this was a World Bank project. And of course, in that project, again, he was taking the leading role and I would always be like a supporting role. And immediately, as soon as I got in, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. A different culture, different people, a lot of poverty. I feel like, wow, this is my world. This is where I can definitely make a difference. So much to do. And of course, the first thing, again, I always end up teaching young people. I don't know why. It always starts with teaching English, and then it starts with, goes into teaching something else. So I immediately found some NGOs and charities that I got myself involved with. Gemini Trust, I remember there was a real high percentage of women in Ethiopia who were giving birth to twins. And, you have one child who you're struggling to raise, and suddenly you have two. Can you imagine the impact of that on the family economically? And so it's always women, it's always young people, it's always women who were making things that, again, I kind of always find those kind of communities. And there were women, I remember, who were very, very young to give birth, like teenagers, 14, 15. And when you give birth at a super young age, like literally your entire system, body system, the organs, was just so sad to see what was happening to them when they literally couldn't even walk, 100 meters where, they, the urine incontinence and everything else. There was this incredible organization who was trying to help them in so many different ways, whether it's surgically or whether it's also to teach them the skills to get them actually into employment. So I always find those challenging communities, and I love it because I feel like, wow, every single person, you, me, everyone, there is so much we can do collectively or even individually to make someone else's life a better, better in some way or another. So I kind of always felt like I was there to do something that would make a difference to that community. And so I always sought those opportunities deliberately. So I wouldn't just go and join, marketing manager in some a big project or organization, I would be like, where are those women, those young people? Where are those, people who really haven't got opportunities? What can I do to help them? What can I teach? So it was always like that. I don't know why.
Your kind of keenness to go and help others, can it be because of you shouting out to the world, I need some help as well?
Probably. Maybe because it's kind of always like a reflection, right? It's reflecting what's inside of you. Probably. I think in those times I did need help, but I was too ashamed to ask for it. So that's why in a lot of the interviews, podcast or not, one of the questions always pops up, what would you recommend, the women, the audiences that will be listening to this podcast? I'm like, ask for help. This is literally my one advice. When you're stuck, when you're in pain, when you are in emotional pain, like, do not be scared to ask for help, because there is somebody out there. Literally even a few weeks ago, somebody sent me a WhatsApp message because they know what I've been through and I could help advise, and said there is this girl who's going to go to a court, there is a court hearing against her boyfriend who is, no. I'm like, okay, this is what you do, X, Y, and Z. So it's always, ask for help, like, because it's so, so important to do this. And maybe, yes, you're right. At that time, I kind of tried to bury my own pain and things that I was experiencing. And I would be like, okay, well, he had another one of these moments. Well, he locked me in the house. He took Victoria and he spent the whole weekend in some hotel where I thought, wow, he kidnapped my daughter. What am I going to do? Who am I going to call? I call the police and they say, Elena, we're just police and he works at the UN and you as well. It's like, I'm not sure we can do anything to help you, because even if we ask him about it, he'll be like, who are you? So we don't know what to do, how to help you. But we appreciate that you're locked in the house, and if anything happens, you're locked in the house. Nothing we can do. Yeah. And the only thing I could do at that time is like hope that he will just calm down. What did I do? I just asked, can I please go and see my mom? I haven't seen her in like 7 years. I just want to go and see my mom. Why do you have to be angry and, not pay for my exam? So I was doing my degree at LSE at that time as well. It was external program with the University of London. And he would be like, if I make him angry for whatever reason, he would just say, well, you know what, this year I'm just not going to pay for your exams. So I spent the whole year reading books, spending so much time in this amazing UN library in Addis Ababa, like reading these archives of foreign affairs. Oh my goodness, this is like my world. I would just spend so much time, even on weekends or whatnot. Victoria's in school, she's fine. Okay, I'm just going to go to that library and spend a few hours reading. So I spent a lot of time preparing for these exams, only to realize that in May, after one of those conversations, that he would be like, I'm not going to pay, so sorry, try again next year.
One of his ways of controlling and manipulating you into staying with him.
Yeah, that was one of his tactics, yeah. It's not just him. It was so interesting. When we lived in a women's refuge with Victoria, it was only about 7. We stayed the journey we've all had, is exactly the same. It's incredible. It is so incredible how the pattern of abuse and she would start telling me a story. Oh, I had the same. Oh my God, can you believe it? He also did this. Oh yeah, and my husband did that too. So it was literally, you could finish somebody else's story because it was so the same.
I don't know, is it lack of awareness then? I mean, if it is so common, if it is the same pattern, why do people keep falling into the same trap? What can we do to educate people to raise awareness?
Well, the thing is, I stayed in that relationship for something like 7 or 8 years, right? It took me a lot of courage to leave that relationship. First and foremost, he would always tell me, if you ever leave me, I'm just going to send you to Uzbekistan. He would literally, always say, I will send you, I will deport you.
So it was as if like you are
he's like a god, right?
Right.
So he would always say, well, I'm just going to deport you. I'll make sure you're going to go back, and Victoria will stay with me. So you will never see your daughter again. So he was saying that to me from literally day one. So it was almost like, he, as soon as he possibly could, he managed to get her to become British. So through a process, he's the father who's British. And we did this in Macedonia when she was only like 9 months old when we just arrived. So he was like, the first thing I need to do is make sure she's got that British passport. For me, I'm like, okay, fine. I don't really mind. I'm very naive and like very trusting. I'm like, I'm sure this is the best thing for her. Anyway, clearly, British passport has more value than Uzbek passport and all that. So I kind of let him do it because he was really worried. What if she's like automatically like Uzbek or whatnot? To make sure, there is nothing else. And then the second thing, he immediately told me, like, if you ever even think about leaving me, because obviously he knew I was just there, arranged marriage, maybe you would call it, arranged by him. I'm actually quite in favor of arranged marriage. It definitely worked for my mom and dad. I thought they're very much connected and everything. Probably doesn't work for everyone, but for me it was like, okay, I just have to do it, for the sake of. And as long as he's civil and he doesn't, do anything weird and horrible to me, then maybe I'll have some patience. And as long as I have the opportunity to grow. So, but every time, every few months he would just rage and do something really weird and horrible, take my passport, take this and that, like lock me in or whatever. And it kind of almost felt like you're scared. You're really scared. Because remember, I had no money. He would never let me have any cash. He would only, he would be the one we would go together to the supermarket. I would pick and choose what we need. For dinner, we would plan, and then he would go and buy. I would never have any cash. We had a joint account, but he always had the cards. I never had any access to it. I had no idea what was in there. And so it's pretty scary to leave something like this where you are really in the unknown. So I also wasn't British. And so I kind of knew I didn't really have the rights. So if I did have the rights, I probably could have left, and maybe the state would have offered me some help to begin with, like, some benefits, the support with childcare and whatnot. But I had no idea what my rights were because he would never leave me out of his sight. And I guess at that time, I wasn't really looking for this information online either, because I don't think there was much information available as self-help for those who are victims of domestic violence. And I didn't really even know that I was going through that. And those words, domestic violence, was not something I even thought about or knew of. I learned about those words like quite a few years later. So it's always pretty scary. So a lot of women who are trapped in those circumstances, it's a really tough decision to make, to leave that situation, because I only have one child, but a lot of women who I remember came to that refuge, they have 3 kids. Some of them have 4 kids. I remember there was a woman who came into the refuge and she left the next day. She went back to her husband. She drove, and that refuge was somewhere in Dorset. She drove all the way from the Isle of Wight. It's a long trip with 3 kids. She came to the refuge, and I could see she was crying. She was distressed, and I was there already for like 4 months or something like that. So I've kind of seen a lot by then, and I've heard so many stories. I have seen the kids who are affected by this, and I looked at her and I'm like, oh, okay, she probably needs a bit more help, like a conversation. So I kind of decided to befriend her on that evening, and I spoke to her, and she said, I think I'm going to go back. And I said, oh no, don't. You really don't want to go back. This refuge is amazing. They're going to support you, because I came into the refuge with £20 in my pocket and nothing else. I was fortunate on that day. He gave me £20. He said, when you're coming back, just buy this and that. I'm like, sure. That was all the money I had when I came to the refuge.
What was the story there? You said that it took a lot of courage for you to
what happened? What actually happened? Yes. So we were in Bangladesh, and just before going to Bangladesh, we made an agreement. Obviously not signed, because you don't do that with your husband, right? Yeah. But we agreed. I said it was 2008, like summer or something like that. And I said to him, look, I'm going to come to Bangladesh, but I really need to go to Uzbekistan and see my mom and dad. like by then, so imagine I left in 2000 and that's what 2008, 8 years. I haven't seen my mum at all. So I only saw very briefly when Victoria was a year old. So we went from Macedonia, and I think he was a little bit worried because because Victoria had a passport, and then they questioned us, I think, when we were leaving the country, is that even your daughter? And I was so scared. And he's like, they questioned us, they asked, maybe this was not like our daughter, did they think maybe we were kidnapping? And he, I think, was so worried that what if it happens again
Right.
and somebody kidnaps Victoria, or in Uzbekistan, or somebody would not let us leave the country, right? So he was a bit worried, and I reassured him, look, I'll have my mum and dad there. They're going to meet us. You know, I have so many friends. It's not going to happen. Don't worry. When we were going to Bangladesh, I said, I'm going to come out. But I said, I am going to leave Victoria with you. And I just need to go for like 2 weeks at least to see my mum and dad. And he kind of said, oh, well, okay, fine. And I said, okay, great. So we have an agreement. But as soon as I came to Bangladesh, and that was quite a, we were leaving England with an intention to stay in Bangladesh for 2 years. Like every project that we take is like a couple of years. And I had a role in that as well. And so I was excited, but I said, I'll only go because it's not my favorite place. It's very humid in there, and I just don't like those levels of humidity, but it's an interesting country. I loved reading about Muhammad Yunus and what he did for women. So for me, I'm like, I already know if I go to Bangladesh, these are the kind of things I'll be interested in doing. So I kind of already mapped my thinking around where I can fit in. And so I said, I'm happy to go, but that's my only condition. I really need to go. So he said, fine. And as soon as I came in, he's like, well, I've changed my mind. And he immediately took my passport, hidden it away. And he said, well, you're going to have to stay here. And I guess by then I was like so getting fed up. And I'm like, why? Like, why are you doing this? Like, you're going to have Victoria here, and I just need to go on my own. Well, what if you don't come back? He said, like, why wouldn't I come back? Why would I leave my daughter, somewhere? I said, my daughter is my daughter. I said, I will always be with her. So I'm not going to stay in Uzbekistan. Well, what if, you fall in love with someone? Because what if some, ex, student, colleague, whatever, from university, whatever, will find you. And what if you decide to stay because you find someone? I think he was always very insecure, very worried that, because obviously we didn't have that foundation that most couples do, or one would imagine so. He was always worried of losing me to someone else. And it was always like a little bit funny for me, because I'm honestly like, I'm so done. I'm just not interested. I just want to work. I just want to do something great. But he was worried, and he's like, what if you don't come back? So he changed his mind, and I said, okay, well, you've changed your mind. I'll change my mind as well. So I'm just going to be Victoria's mum, and that is it. Nothing else. Like, don't expect anything else from me. I'm just going to train our cook how to cook good English food. By then I was like an expert in English food. You can imagine 8 years of training. And that's it. And I'm just going to, make sure she's, being educated and everything else. And I will find my own work. So you don't even have to worry about it. And I was kind of confident that I would find something super cool and interesting to do. He got angry, annoyed, but there was nothing he could do, or at least I thought there was nothing he could do. But what he did decide to do is he decided to cheat on me. And I remember that day. It was so well remember that day when I was in his office doing a Skype call with my mom. And, you always, if there is like a notebook or something, you sometimes just flick for the sake of flicking. Or at least what I do, maybe I, and I was just looking through this notebook of his, and I'm like flicking through, and I found this really many emails and passwords, and I'm like, oh, what's happening? He knows my email and password. I know his email, so there was this, at least there was that level of trust a little bit to begin with. I've never seen these emails. What is that? And I was in front of his laptop because obviously I'm speaking to my mom. I said, oh, wait a minute, Mom, I'm just going to quickly log in. What's all this? And I logged into one email, and I found this really interesting conversations between him and his and some escort agency in Thailand. I'm like, wow, Mom. And I literally was all on the call. Can you believe it? I've just found this, wow, I just literally caught him red-handed. Mom, I have a reason to divorce him, like a good cause.
So you were happy about it?
I was so happy. I was literally like over the moon. I'm like, because it's, I think the law at that time, like when you are married and everything, you have to give a reason, or like there was irreconcilable differences or something else. I'm like, that's not just irreconcilable differences, that's like cheating. So adultery. So Mom, I have caught him red-handed, that's it. And she's like, be careful, just be careful. I'm like, yeah, it's fine, I'll send a message to some friends of mine in England, maybe they'll advise me, like lawyers and da-da-da. I was so excited. And then as soon as he turned up, he came back home and I'm like, hello. Well, I caught you red-handed. I said, I've got all of this correspondence. I forwarded it to my inbox. I have all the evidence I need. So I'm going to say goodbye to you soon. And, Victoria's coming with me because she's my daughter and everything. And I had no idea how stupid that was to tell him that in a country, not only in a country, but in a little area. We lived in Chittagong Hill Tracts. So Otterbeck, when you have time, just look it up and maybe, just maybe, you will find just how, what a very interesting region it is, but at the same time, how much human rights abuse there is in just one area. And in those days, 2008, we had the government of Bangladesh who were almost like trying to, I don't know what the best word would be to describe, but they were trying to force this only Christian population on that little island to become Muslim. And they would be burning houses and, their own places of prayers, building mosques and forcing people into mosques and forcing people to speak a specific, language or a different tribe or whatnot. And there was a kind of abuse that I honestly have not seen anywhere in the world. And I've been, all over the Balkans. And obviously, with a lot of the readings I was doing at that time because of my degree, I thought, wow, I thought I knew a lot of interesting stories and case studies like Rwanda, genocide in Rwanda and, Kosovo bombings, like you name it, every single human rights abuse that was done at an international level. I knew everything because that was kind of what I studied. And so I was like, I've never heard of Chittagong Hill Tracts and the abuse that was happening there. It was very, very hidden. When we came to the area, the only phones they had were brick phones, and that was 2008. And I thought, this is such an interesting place. Everything is very historical, very authentic. They're still wearing tribal costumes. It was like my dream, right? My dream place. And I was like, this is interesting. But I had no idea there was so much abuse happening. And then every time I would want to go and just be me, which is going and exploring and just feeding my curiosity with some tribe, because there was a really interesting tribe there, Chakma tribe. And I'm like, I just want to meet normal people, talk to them. I have the police following me. And I'm like, why are you following me all the time? And they're like, well, we just want to make sure nothing happens to you. And then I realized later on that they were following me because they didn't want the locals talking to me about things that were happening, because I was one of the only foreigners in that little island. So we were the only foreign family. And of course, being the only foreign family in a place which is known, for its abusive culture or, the human rights abuse that were perpetuated at that time, I had nobody to talk to. We were the only foreigners, apart from some other consultants that would just come in and then leave. So I only really spent 4 or 5 months there maximum. And then by then I kind of realized, okay, there was definitely a lot I would love to do here, but my own family situation was becoming like really weird. And I had to look after my own safety and Victoria's, because as soon as he found out that I learned about his endeavors to go to Thailand, whether he did it or not, I don't really know or cared at that time, but I had enough evidence, and I confronted him and I told him, and the first thing he did, he of course took, made sure that my passport was very well hidden. He took my laptop, my watch, like everything, jewelry, like the whole thing, like he would normally do, the clothes, put it all in a suitcase and again lock it away so that I have no access to anything. It was almost like I know he would have to go to work in the morning, so I would be searching for things everywhere, unless he took them into his office, which to begin with he didn't. But then when he realized that I actually found my passport and I found my laptop and I could actually send an email, to somebody in England to ask for help, he then obviously took it back. And I remember 2 nights, Victoria and I slept in one bedroom, and we were under the lock because I was too scared, because I had my passport and he was looking for it as well to take it back. And it was almost like this volatile, almost like it could even turn into a physical fight, where he was kind of, I was holding the door and he was trying to open it and I was trying to close it, and Victoria's fingers got caught in, and I was just so scared. What is going to happen next? Like, if he opens that door, is he going to kill me? Is he going to do something else? Because literally you are on this island where literally you cannot leave the island and you cannot come into the island without a specific visa. So Bangladesh visa is not enough. You have to have Chittagong Hill Tract visa as well. And so you have to have special permission from the police, and every time you come in, the police literally interviews you. Why are you here? What do you want to do? And every time you want to leave, they also interview you, ask you, why do you want to go? Why do you want to leave? And so I'm in that situation where I'm kind of terrified, because if he does something to me, nobody will ever find out. It was literally that bad. And so I somehow at that time, just because me being me, I already was in touch with Reuters in Dhaka, the capital, and they were looking to offer me a job to do some editing or something like that. I can't remember now, but they were interviewing me and I was excited. I'm like, I'm going to be, with a news agency, doing some journalistic work or something like that, reporting or doing something else. I was excited, and at the same time as I was kind of really scared and frightened for my life in those 2 days, what I did is I went to the chief of the tribe, Chakma tribe, and I used her telephone to call his boss at the UN, who was based in Dhaka, and I told him, I said, Patrick, things are happening. I'm really scared because he could do something to me or to Victoria, because he said he would take her away. He could go to Nepal, he said, and I would never see her again. And I said, I'm really scared. He said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I think I know him pretty well. I don't think he can do this. I'm like, are you then suggesting that I am just imagining all of this? Are you just telling me that all of this is just a fantasy? Why would I fantasize like that? And I said to him, I can't give you any evidence. I literally don't have my mobile. He took it away. I have got no laptop. I'm in somebody else's home making this call, and he might walk in anytime as well, because somebody could be seeing me or report me or whatnot, because he had so much control in that area, because he was, a chief of this project in the UNDP locally, so like a team leader. So he had everyone, at the police who would know him, the office. And I was really scared. I said, I really don't have much time, but I can tell you, if you don't send a car for me and my daughter, I'm going to call Reuters. That will be the next call I will make. And I will so make this story go live everywhere. I said, I'm going to send this to London office, I'll send this to wherever I can. And everyone will know that you, UNDP, are employing a wife abuser. That's what I told him. I think he got a bit scared. And he sent a car after me. He said, okay, Elena, I think we have a car. There is a consultant in the area, so I'm just going to tell him to come in and pick you up. And so I said, okay, how much time do I have? Maybe an hour or so. I said, okay, that's enough. So I literally immediately took the biggest suitcase I could possibly find, put all the bits and pieces I could find for Victoria and myself. She still remembers, she said, Mummy, but you left my scooter mummy. And it was my favorite scooter, my favorite thing. I remember, I still have photos of her scootering and videos and everything. You left it. I'm like, Victoria, priorities at that time were different. Yeah, so I just basically jumped into that car with Victoria. And he was trying to walk and prevent me, stop me. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not even going to talk to you. I really have to go. Because prior to that, he was, holding pills and said, just take these pills, you're just going to fall asleep and nobody will ever find out. I'll just take Victoria back to England. She'll go to a really good boarding school. You don't have to worry about anything. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not going to work like that. I'm going. And there were his office members who just told him, okay, Michael, like, stop, let her go, we'll sort it out. And they let me go. So it was like a long 6-hour journey to the capital. And somebody else from the office accommodated us for a few days until we at least know what we're doing. And I remember, I'll never forget this moment when the next day I was told, some of the friends that I've had in Ethiopia, they said, Elena, is you doing this again? Like, make sure you go to the police, log it in, which is something else I always recommend. If something is happening in the family, which is domestic violence, abuse, or something horrific, like log it in with the police or even log it in your diary with friends. Some trail needs to happen. And I decided to go to the police station to log it in. And I was met with this really interesting interview that I had to go through by this policeman who was asking me questions like, okay, he's much older than you, right? So why did you marry him? And I'm like, you know what? I'm not here to answer any of your, questions that will just, all of this judgmental stuff. I said, I'm here because I really need your help, because my daughter is in danger. I am in danger because my husband wants to kidnap my daughter. He literally told me he will take her to Nepal and I will never see her again. I just need you to do something to help me. And again, I think the response I received was, he's in the UN and we're police and da-da-da. But they logged it in at least. I had some paper trail. And I took it with me. And then I found there was a women's organization in Bangladesh. They're actually pretty strong on women rights and women's, women empowerment. I found them. It was like a women's aid type organization. I said to them, I have this situation. Can anyone offer me any advice? Is there anyone legal I can speak to? A lawyer. And they very quickly, they found someone to talk to me, obviously English is not a problem there as well. So I met a few people there. They gave me advice. They said, you have to go back to England. Even though you don't have your British nationality, passport and stuff like that, England is still the best place for you to seek some protection and some refuge, something. So they said, whatever you do, just try to go back to England as soon as possible. And I received the same advice in the British consulate. So I basically went to the embassy as well immediately, and I said to them, my husband has got my passport, he's got my daughter's passport, and quite possibly he might take her, if he has any contact with her, he could just literally grab her and go. So I need to put something in place, something, I need your advice, I need something that will protect me whilst I'm here until we go to England. And he said exactly the same. He said, I can see this becoming quite like a long protracted litigation. He obviously really, really angry. He said, just go to England, and the first thing you do when you're back, back home is to contact some lawyers. And I said, I don't have any money, there is nothing, I just literally wouldn't know what to do. He said, there will always be pro bono support, and that's again, there are lawyers who would give you pro bono advice, and Citizens Advice Bureau are really exceptional when it comes to domestic violence or things like that. And so that was the advice I received, and I immediately told his boss, I said, we have to go back to England, so I need him to get the flights. I don't have any money. So he has got the passports. So I don't mind if he wants to hold on to these passports and, show them to the customers or whatever. He's so scared. But I said, I need to get out of here. Victoria's coming with me. He's welcome to, to stay here. That would be ideal. He said, no, I actually told him to go as well. I'm like, okay, fine. And I want you to just like sort it out, like as a family. I said, sure, we'll do our best. I was super happy to be on that flight back to London. And as soon as we came to Bournemouth, so we lived in Bournemouth at that time, I just remember that evening when he was kind of already having conversations with lawyers, and I'm like, I don't even know who to call. I didn't even have a mobile because he took it away from me. And I'm like, okay, let's just see what happens. And I knew in the next morning I had to take Victoria to school because I sent a message to the school and said, we're coming back. Can Victoria please go back to school immediately because situation is not great. I'll tell you when I see you, but I really need her to be back in a school environment. And of course, as soon as I brought her to school, I immediately went to speak to the head teacher, and I said to her, I think I was crying. I think that was like the end of my, patience. I think there was just a tiny drop left in that glass of water, and I just was crying, and I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know whether, because he told me this morning even, on our way to school, he said, one day I'm going to pick her up from school and I'm going to take her across the ferry and you will never see her again, he said. And I was like shaking by then. I said, I literally don't know whether he's going to do this today or maybe he's going to do this tomorrow. But I said, I don't feel safe anymore. And she literally, the head teacher herself, told one of the teachers, please can you take her to the Citizens Advice Bureau, which is literally like 15 minutes walk from here. And you need to stay there and get some proper advice. And that's what I did. And that was my moment when I picked up that flyer and I learned a new word or two words, domestic violence. That was quite...
After 8 years experiencing it.
Yes, I had no idea that was it. And I picked up the flyer and I'm like, oh wow, that's interesting. And of course, when I met that advisor in the Citizens Advice Bureau, he said, I'm gonna put you in touch with the police. You're gonna have to call, tell them everything. Like they're gonna ask you a lot of questions, and you have to tell them everything as it was happening. It will be painful. But you have to tell them this because they're the only, they have specialist department in domestic violence who are trained in this, and of course they will be able to help. So I had a very long conversation with a female policewoman, and she asked me a lot of questions. It was a very emotional conversation because I think it was probably first time that I actually talked about it and spoke about it in a very open way where she was asking me questions and I was able to respond. And she said, okay, I don't want you to go home today. We're going to think of something we're going to find you a different place. I'm like, what do you mean? Where am I going? And she's like, there are places in England called Women's Refuge. They're specifically designed for women in your circumstances. And I'm like, and I didn't want to go. I said, oh no. I said, what about my daughter? She's in school. She said, don't worry, there will always be a school nearby where temporarily they will have a place. And by law, they will always have a place for kids who are looked after or in those kind of circumstances. So she said, don't worry about it. I said, I don't have any money. I literally have £20. That's not going to last even a day. She said, again, don't worry. We're going to pay for the taxi to the Women's Refuge, and the Women's Refuge we're going to send you to, they're going to take care of everything. I'm like, okay, fine. So all I need you to do now is go home, pack your bag. And I was so scared, and because she said, is he at home at the moment? I said, no, I have really no idea where he is. He might be at home, but maybe he's not. I think he had plans to meet his cousin who's a lawyer and all of that. So he was getting ready, to hide his money and everything. I'm like, I have so many other priorities than your money. But that was the first thing he wanted to do, to make sure that I don't have hold of his money. And of course, as soon as I came home, I think I found the, again, largest suitcase or two, started putting everything in, packing. And of course, as soon as I was nearly there, the police already was in the house. There was a woman who was trying to help me. She said, "Don't worry, I'm with you." I said, "What if he comes back? Like, he can come back any moment." I was like shaking, I was crying. She's like, "Don't worry, I'll deal with that. Don't worry, I'm trained." I said, "He will have no regard for you because you're a female policeman. He has no regard for women in those leadership positions." She said, "It's okay. I will just, handle that. And if I need backup, I'll call for backup." And that was it. He came home. He was raging. "Where's my daughter? Where are you going?" Angry, screaming and shouting and everything. And she just, "Ignore him. I'll deal with him. Just carry on packing. Just pack what is necessary. Do not pack everything." And I was just standing there with all her favorite teddies, and I had no idea what to take and what to leave, because it's one of those moments where your kids is like, I already left that scooter in Bangladesh and that unicorn and whatnot. And it was I didn't know what to take, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to pick what's important and what I think would be okay for the next 6 months, because she said you'll probably stay there for quite a bit until you sort things out. I did know at that time that we would stay there for 6 months, because I thought, okay, maybe just a few weeks and then we'll be back home. It was this hopeful feeling. And then, of course, my daughter, fortunately at that time, I arranged for her to stay with a friend of mine from school. So she just happened to be in the school at that time, and I explained. I think she kind of already knew. I think she had a bit more experience with men and with those circumstances, because she herself was an abusee, and she kind of picked up on certain things that I didn't pick up, or I kind of knew that they were happening, but I'm like, oh, that's just his thing, his way of being. So as soon as I came back, she knew something was up, and she said, "You know what, I'll pick up Victoria today, and I'll have her at home, and when you're ready, you just pick her up." And so the police then took me to my friend. We picked up Victoria, then they arranged for a taxi, and the taxi took us to the refuge, and he was following the taxi, again in his rage and anger, and the police told him, "Please do not follow that car. And if you do, we're going to have to have backup and stop you," and all of that. And he carried on, and then, lost his way, or just probably decided maybe that was not a good idea. Maybe his cousin lawyer advised him to just be cool. Yeah, and I just came into the refuge in the evening. It was 8th of October. Wow, I even remember the date. Those dates we remember. And I was welcomed. We had like a little studio room, not bigger than this room, by the way, and with a sofa bed and like a little kitchen area. And we ended up living there for 6 months. And of course, my £20 didn't last long. But I was very grateful that I didn't have to pay the rent. So the refuge covered everything. Apparently, in those days, I don't know how things are right now, but there were only 2 women's refuge houses that could host a woman that had no recourse to any public funds. Everywhere else, a woman would have to tap into her either savings, or if she was already on any like benefits or something like that, then the state would help. But I had nothing, zero, like literally nothing. So it was quite a moment for me to kind of end up in a place and wonder, like, what's next? What's going to happen next? I had no idea. I just knew that the man that I was married to was on a mission to destroy my life, because that is what he said. He said, "I am going to destroy you. Like, you wait. I will deport you. I will have Victoria. I have the judges in my pocket," he said. I didn't know what that meant at that time, and then I'm like, "Oh, did he pay them? Is the judicial system in the UK really that corrupt?" I had no idea what will happen. And then I received a letter from the Home Office telling me, "We keep getting these letters from your husband, and he keeps telling us there is no need for you to be in the UK. And he asked us, maybe you should go back home to Uzbekistan. So we're thinking, to send you back home to Uzbekistan." And I read that letter, and I was like, I wasn't sure whether I should be happy because finally I'm actually going to go back home, right? Or whether I should be sad because I'm being like, deported or something? What is that for the status, right? And all of that. So I kind of thought, well, I'm super happy. I'll finally see my mom and dad. And you know what? Once I'm in Uzbekistan, I'm pretty sure I'll have people I know, people who will introduce me to somebody, because I kind of always believed in my ability to survive. And I always knew whatever happens, I think I have enough, I'm resilient enough to like stand anything, that comes my way. So it was kind of one of those letters that I kind of thought, wow, this is amazing. I can go to Uzbekistan. So I showed this to the refuge lawyers. There is always going to be somebody who is familiar with like legal things. And she said, Elena, well, she said, if you go to Uzbekistan, you're going to lose Victoria because she's British, you are Uzbek, and there is no way he's going to let this just, he's not going to let her come with you. He's going to take you to court. He's going to fight you in court. He's going to say Victoria's used to being like in England, abroad or whatever, that Uzbek is, culture is different in Uzbekistan. He will find a way. He will put a really strong case and he will fight his every, his own like very being. Like he will do everything because she is his one thing that he has. He doesn't have any other kids. His daughter was something he really doted on. And she's like, I have some bad news for you. You're going to have to stay. So you're going to have to stay and you're going to have to fight. You're going to have to fight him. And you're going to have to go to the immigration tribunal. You're going to have to say no. And we're going to find you a lawyer. And you're going to have to fight them as well. So you have those two cases on your plate. And you can do it. And I didn't know what to do. I was just distraught and I was crying. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that when I thought I was free, I was actually like up against this hell. And I promise you, Otterberg, it was hell. For 7 years of my life, I was in hell against this man who would just take me to court every 2 months. He would just, like a joke. I still have control of you because when I take you to court, you come to court. I call for you, you come, even though it's in court. And I had no idea this was my life for the next 7 years. And I thought, okay, it's just going to be an immigration tribunal. I'm going to breeze through that because surely I have a good case to stay. And apparently in those days, I don't know how things are now with the Conservative government, but I think it was Labour at that time. And the law stated that if you are a victim of domestic violence, you have a right to stay in the UK on the grounds of domestic violence. So I'm like, okay, so I kind of have a clear case. I just have to give some evidence. And I started collating evidence from friends who have seen some really weird things in the family. And, whenever something happened, I would write to somebody. I had no idea that this would prove useful, but I would just write to somebody and say, oh, this happened to me and I'm not sure what to do. And, I had a few close friends, even in Ethiopia and even in Macedonia, that I could confide. And he didn't know that I had friends because he wasn't allowing me any friends. But there were people who knew, and they would always tell me, I don't know how long you can carry on like that, but just, we're there to support you, which was super sweet. There were some families and my girlfriends, and they were all, foreign, and I met them through work in Ethiopia or Macedonia. And but I made a case and I collected some evidence, and there were some people who were happy to write. And I was so grateful that they would be able to write a statement, like a witness statement, because I had to produce 3 and I had no idea who ever witnessed anything. But mostly it was kind of describing my character, his character, what they saw, what I told them, and I had no idea whether that would even be enough. But the refuge introduced me to a law firm in Oxford. So they paid for my trip to go to Oxford. And I had this amazing, amazing lawyer who listened to me. And she said, I'm going to get a a great barrister who will represent you from pro bono in Wales. So I had to go to Wales for the tribunal, so it's miles and miles away. And so she will go and she will be in touch and we'll put a case together with you. And don't worry, it will be fine. So I went, the case was adjourned, came back, I had to go again in a few weeks. I had a friend of our family who kind of was the only friend who stayed loyal to me. And he was like an old family friend based in Oxfordshire as well. And my husband wrote to all of our friends to tell them she absconded me. She left me. She's, bad. She's a gold digger. I'm like, oh, what gold was there to dig? Like, I've never seen anything. She's this and that, everything you could possibly imagine. He would tell them, like, if she writes to you, you do not support her. And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. But there was one friend who just called me and he was like, what happened? Like, tell me. And of course, I told him everything and he said, oh, I'm coming. I'll take you to the tribunal. I'm not allowed to know where your refuge is, so you just have to tell me where to meet you. And even I remember that Christmas, I think it was my daughter's favorite Christmas for a long time because the refuge made such an incredible effort. Every family in the refuge received this massive refuse bag of presents. And I'm like, wow, I've never been given that many presents. I don't think I've ever been given presents like that. And it was like, and Victoria always says, Mommy, do you remember that Christmas in the women's refuge? I'm like, yeah, I do remember that Christmas. And this person somehow, apparently when you go to like a John Lewis or like a department store, you can order something or buy something in the department store. And if you tell them that this is actually being sent to a women's refuge in a specific area, they won't tell you where it is because you're not meant to know, particularly it's kept very secret, and definitely that wouldn't be disclosed to just anyone. It's a secret location, and she's like, okay, I will send it on your behalf, but nobody will know like who sends or where it's going to. You will definitely not know. And so we received that gift, a chess set, like a travel chess set. I remember we have it at home, and I'm like, wow, people have sent gifts not even knowing where exactly we are. The address is all hidden. It was quite a Christmas. But that person stayed in touch and he said, just tell me where you want me to take you and I'll take you. So he took us to the immigration tribunal and agreed to become a witness, in court as well. And I'm like, you don't even know some of the details. That he said, it's okay, it's fine, I don't need to know. But actually, I have seen what was happening already. So he was quite a senior, 60-something years old. So he kind of had enough life experience, I guess, to discern what was happening in the family. And he took me, and I was in the tribunal, and the judge was just looking at me, and he's like, Elena, I'm just reading your profile. You've already worked in all these organizations. You're not the typical woman who I, have to decide to retain in the UK or to deport. Usually it's, somebody from Somaliland, from Ethiopia, from other parts of the African countries or Asian countries. And she said, I don't often come across such a well-written CV and profile and somebody who's done so much already. What happened? And I'm like, well, guess what? I guess even UN people and people who, because my husband also had an MBE from the Queen for the work he did in Uzbekistan. How ironic is that? The heritage and the revival, he actually got an award for that. So I said, there are people who get these MBEs and UN workers and who do humanitarian work, who are also wife abusers. So I'm here because I could no longer stay in that relationship. And obviously he had all the evidence and everything. So he said, okay, well, I'm seeing all the evidence and I believe you. I don't have your husband here to tell me his version of the story, but based on all the evidence I have, I'm going to keep you here. I'm going to retain you in England. I'm going to give you indefinite to remain or whatever it was. And then in a year's time, I think you then qualify to become British and they give you British passports. So there was the process. So he said, I'll retain you in England. on the grounds of domestic violence. So this was like a win case for me. So I was super happy. And then he said something really interesting, the judge. He said, and also like looking at what you've done, I feel like keeping you in England is the right choice for other reasons as well. I'm pretty sure, you're going to do something great here and make a difference here too. And at that time, it just, I couldn't care less. I just need to stay here so that I have my daughter. That was really my motivation and my reasons. So when he told me that, I'm like, whatever, I don't even know where I will be tomorrow. But I remembered that somehow it got stuck in my head, in my mind. And I'm like, I kind of remembered that when I was already recovering kind of on that rehabilitative journey myself as an entrepreneur, which was a really interesting twist because I kind of never thought that I would be on that journey myself. I was kind of always enabling and inspiring and showing how to others, not really knowing myself, but people believed in everything I had to say. And then I ended up on that journey myself. And then I realized, wow, what he was saying was almost like a prophecy. And I literally have no idea who that judge was. I don't remember his name. I don't remember what he looked like because everything is very blurred from that because it was a very traumatic period which I so desperately wanted to forget. But I left and I came home and I was so happy that and my daughter was looked after by a family. They said, just go, like, don't worry, we'll pick you up from school if you have to come back later, whatever. And we the next thing that happened was he obviously instigated a family court as well. So I had immigration on the one hand and a family court at the same time. And the family court were waiting for the
outcome of the
immigration. Yeah, and they told me, if you're deported, then he may have a strong case and maybe your daughter will have to stay. So I literally was scared because she was the only thing I had. And and I was so happy. So we kind of sent the outcome to the other judge and said, well, guess what? I'm staying. so get ready because I'm coming back and to fight my case there as well. So I also had a barrister. It was all done on legal aid because I literally had literally no money to pay. So I was very grateful, although the barrister was a little bit rubbish, which I thought, oh my goodness, I know my case better. So we managed to also get what is called residency rights, I think. So you become like a resident parent. So your daughter lives with you. And then my husband got visitation rights, so like a contact parent. So, and that's where I thought, finally, right? You kind of want to breathe and you're like, you want that. And my daughter is with me and everything is fine and, everything is over. But for me, that wasn't over because when this person said, I'm going to destroy your life and destroy you and just make sure you never work and you never do anything, he was so serious about it. So literally his entire purpose in life, because he was already becoming older as well, and he couldn't really find a job in the UN or somewhere because he was already pension age. So he decided, okay, I'm just going to stay in England. So not working. So his entire purpose in life became, how can I destroy this woman? Shall we pause here?
We shall. And for many people, what you have experienced would be a very shattering experience. You are there with no money, no even rights to live in a foreign place, no work, young daughter, and someone who is keen to make sure that your life is not an easy life. And despite of that, you have done a lot of amazing things. What kept you driving? What was that drive?
I think when you keep somebody imprisoned, which is how I felt my life was for the not only for the 8 hours that I was in a relationship, but also for the next, almost 7 years of me being in court, in and out of court, you feel like your wings have been kind of clipped in a way that you literally haven't got the agency to do anything. You feel quite stuck. And so as soon as I started already feeling, okay, it's kind of easing a little bit, he's kind of getting older and he's becoming a little bit less, maybe doesn't care as much or, that win after win, that I had to go and prove to court, I'm not preventing contact, I'm not doing this, I'm just like trying to make, create a new life for myself. And this guy just keeps doing this, stalking, writing some emails to my corporate contacts, like clients. He would write to them. He would write something really strange on my LinkedIn. On the posts, like real weird stalking like that.
Is it still happening?
No. He's unfortunately passed away now.
So that's how it ended.
Yeah, so he was kind of trying to do everything to kind of almost prevent me from building anything. So I can't, even when we moved into London, he was leaving some strange messages on my LinkedIn, and I had to call the police and tell them, he's doing that now. Or he would stalk and tell Victoria, who was that person that, I saw mum with? Is that like somebody she's dating? Or, a lot of really weird, strange things. Or every time Victoria wouldn't pick up her phone, like the court said, every Wednesday she has a call with him at 5:00, and he would ring her and she's like, "Mommy, I don't want to talk to him. I want to talk to my friends, or I want to do something else." And he would call me, "Why is Victoria not responding?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know. She's, teenager. She's only, 12, 13. I said, "She wants to do something else. That weekend, she doesn't want to come. She wants to do something else. Why don't you do it the following weekend? We can work together." No, the court said, these are the dates, these are the weekends, and these are the hours that I have contact with her, he said. And if she doesn't, then he would just call the police and say, "Oh, I want to do a welfare check on her." So every Wednesday, I would have the police knocking on my door. And I'm like, "Oh, are you here for tea again?" And they're like, "Yeah, you know what it is. We can't just leave. I just have to have a brief conversation with Victoria just to check she's okay." I'm like, "Sure, Victoria, someone who wants to talk to you." And imagine that every Wednesday, your child sees a policeman who wants to know whether you are alive, whether you are okay, and it's your father who is, I'm super happy she loves him, and I always wanted her to love her father and have a relationship. Yeah.
You have said it a few times in other of your interviews that your daughter is your inspiration. Yes. And she is the reason of you setting up the ACON Aspirations and Teens and AI.
Definitely.
Why tech? Why AI? Like you have told your life story, and I haven't seen any tech or any AI in it.
I know, right? It's. I often wondered myself, how did it even happen? Yes, so my background was very much political science. So the bachelor's degree was international relations and politics and international relations, the other way around. My master's was in war studies. So it's the war studies department in Holborn, King's College London. I always wanted to go to post-conflict countries. So say my favorite places would be Afghanistan or Palestine or Syria. I kind of always wanted there to be that person who will bring in these rehabilitative programs, post-conflict development, capacity building, what can we do as a community to help ourselves? How can we get better? So I kind of always saw myself doing that. So for me, that was one way to resolve peace, is to get people talking, building, collaborating across borders ideally, because for me, this is kind of one way to bring in more understanding and collaboration. And then I guess by the time I finished my degree, I felt like it doesn't resonate with me anymore, because there is just so much when you start unpacking war. There are so many benefits to war. There are so many winners in wars. And I just felt a bit disgusted, maybe. I just thought, I just cannot believe a war is just a mechanism. It's just a tool to further somebody else's end. That was the output of my years or 2 years worth of masters. And I just felt like if I join those forces, whether it's NATO, UN, or other international organizations, I'm almost
being part of that.
Yeah, I'm almost part of
ecosystem.
this whole ecosystem. Yeah, exactly. So because there is a reason why these organizations also exist. If there was no war, if there was no poverty, if there was no, marginalization of specific communities, these organizations also would not exist. So there is a reason why so it felt like there is this whole circle of, interconnectedness of all these different organizations who all benefit in one way or another. And I kind of realized that there are so many winners and beneficiaries of this, the systems. And once you get into this entire dirty politics, it just becomes like you become it. So I kind of had to examine my own values and foundations. Am I really pro it or against it? I'm pro people. I am we the people. I am the one who wants to unlock agency of the people, not agency of the corporate governments or whatnot. So I really love working with ordinary people and see myself empower them. And I kind of felt like being within the system of war or even post-war is really not where I see myself making the most difference. And at that time also, of course, my ex-husband, I just knew, even if I did get an interesting position or post, let's say in Syria or one of the countries that I really wanted to engage, like Somaliland would have been my place to go, somewhere in Africa, he would block me. And he always told me, you will not take Victoria out. She has to stay here, whatever, until I die. And I'm like, okay, that's also another reason why I can't really be doing international projects just yet. Or if I do, it will be like short-term consultancy, right? So, and then just something happened. I remember I came to a parents' evening in a school for my daughter, and I think she was only when do you pick your GCSE subjects? 14, something like that.
14,
I think it was she was about 13 or 14. I think in England they really like terrifying you from age 12 and 13. They literally tell you, if you don't pass your GCSEs, your life is over. I remember my daughter coming home and saying that to me. And I'm like, Victoria, please, I assure you, life is not over. After exams, this is when you start. But of course, with kids, it's like, no, my teacher said I have to. And so I walked into this conversation between her and her teacher, and the teacher was like, my daughter, obviously influenced by some of the stuff that was happening around me. And I talked about coding and tech, just because when you're in London, it's very difficult not to be surrounded by this buzz.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but being at King's College London, you're Holborn, there is entrepreneurship society that I somehow immediately joined.
Of course.
Because I thought, why not? It's just another additional challenge. I was breastfeeding my kid, I had Victoria and, studying, and I just wanted to get involved in entrepreneurship society. And of course, when you're part of entrepreneurship, this in London doesn't go without tech. And Google Campus is around the corner as well. And I'm like, oh, some really cool, interesting stuff happening. So as I walk into this conversation, the teacher tells my daughter, oh, no, computer science, it's for boys, it's boring. It's, why do you want to do this as a girl, sociology, why did you pick sociology? Or maybe psychology, then I'll be your mentor, because this is my subject. And she's like, oh, okay. And I'm obviously witnessing this very strange conversation unfold. And then as soon as she came home, I'm like, Victoria, I heard that. First of all, I told the teacher, like, why are you putting this limiting beliefs into my daughter? And then as soon as we came home and said, oh, there is an event happening, like next weekend, I'll just get somebody to look after Alexander. And you and I are going to go. Like, it's going to be mummy and daughter weekend, and we're going to go to this hackathon. It was a product hunt hackathon. I don't know whether you've lived in London for long enough. It was like 2014. Product hunt hackathon was the first one at WeWork. No, doesn't ring the bell yet. Okay. So, and I thought, oh wow, this is cool. And I looked at Product Hunt. At that time, they were just starting. They were not like as well known as they are right now, but they sponsored this hackathon. And I went with my daughter, and my daughter was pitching an idea, and I'm like, Victoria, this is your opportunity. Like, you can be anything, any problem, anything that you want to create, this is your opportunity. Like, let's think of something. So I kind of gave her this opportunity to think of something she's passionate about. And I can't remember this project anymore, but I just remember that she was the youngest one. She was only 13, I think, and they liked it. And so she built a team around her, me and, mom and daughter and a few people who joined our team, because in that hackathon, you literally had to sell your idea and pitch it. And if somebody likes in the room, they'll like, oh, okay, maybe I'll join you. So we got a team. And then, of course, other teams formed. And so we spent two days in this event hacking, like really building something from scratch. I had a little bit of experience already by then, not in tech, but in other things. So, and then we found somebody who was doing designs, like prototyping. I had no idea what a prototype was. Like, that word was new to me. I'm like, okay, prototyping. I'll know that. Design thinking, I noted that. And then somebody was making a logo, and Victoria was told, oh, Victoria, you want to come with me? We're coming out and we're going to be like interviewing some people. Let's just, get some data. We're going to do some user interviews. What are the questions that we're going to ask? And she was part of that. And I could just see her in 2 days transform in the way where I was like, she's asking questions about something she's really passionate about. And although, her team didn't win, I was in a different team. And we went I think we were runners up. So I'm like, oh, mommy won the hackathon, but next time it's going to be your turn. So it was still quite competitive and everything. But she learned so much, and she was literally asking me the next day, when is the next one? When is the next one? And I thought to myself, what happened to my daughter should happen to every other child. And it was incredible to see her understand concepts she's never interacted with, and even have a go at building like a little prototype of some page or whatnot. And then when it came to pitching, I was trying to take photographs of her like standing there in front of some investors pitching her project. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so I took her to another one, and then she's like, oh, mommy, when is the next one? And I thought to myself, maybe I should create one just for her age group and see what happens. And this was the first hackathon. It happened, I raised a little bit of money. It was literally like £500 just to cover the cost of food. And I managed to get News International to open the doors. Clearly, even despite all of the stuff that was happening, I still retained my networking skills and ability to just knock on people's doors and say, can you please help us with this? And so, yes, and somebody connected me with some other mentors, and they said, I'll share this with this network and other network. And so the word spread, and I had a lot of mentors, zero number of kids apart from my daughter. And I'm like, oh, what's happening? Like, kids just don't want to do this. And so I invited myself to a few schools in Camden, and I said, there is this free opportunity. Your kids are going to learn about X, Y, and Z. And I, at that time, really didn't know what they're going to learn. I just sold it to them on the back of like, they're going to learn a bit of coding. They're going to build something really cool and impactful. Because these were early days. I had no idea that some years later I would bring in design thinking and ethics and AI and whatnot. But those were super early days. And I managed to bring Mike Butcher, who was the editor of TechCrunch. You know the name, right? And I said, okay, Mike, do you want to join as a judge? He said, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll come and I'll support. So somehow I got a lot of people to just say yes to me, and they all came. They're always surprised. They're like, we've never seen a hackathon for teenagers, but let's see what they can build. The kids, obviously, they always exceed everyone's expectations. I have so much faith in the younger generation, and they just amazingly, build some really cool things. And of course, in the end, there was a showcase, and I will never forget Mike Butcher asking me, so who's the MC? And I'm like, what's MC? I don't even know what MC means. Master of ceremony? I said, oh, you mean like introducing projects? And like, well, I said, I don't have anyone in the room. I guess it has to be me. Okay, good luck. So the way you do is, Elena, you don't forget to thank all your sponsors. You bring all your sponsors, you thank them, you make sure that everyone is acknowledged, and then it just goes one by one, and you just give them 3 minutes to pitch. And I said, okay, fine, I got it. I'll just make all the notes. And that was my first demo day that I hosted, and I still have pictures somewhere and whatnot. And I was stupidly wearing high heels, and the next day I couldn't feel my feet. And I said to myself, I will never do this again. Like literally, I will never do this again. This was so much hard work and so stressful to know whether anyone will turn up. Imagine that. You have 70 kids, so the audience is like 100 people. And I'm just standing there in News International, London Bridge, and wondering, what if nobody comes? What if nobody turns up? And I think it was the day of snow as well. And I'm like, oh my God, it's actually snowing. And it's in November, but it already snows. And I had my banner and everything else. And that the fear of every organizer, what if nobody turns up? But everyone turned up. And I was like, wow, not a single drop out. That must be something interesting. But I was exhausted and the stress of it and everything. And I said to myself, I'm just not going to do this. But then I got a lot of messages from moms and dads and mentors. And they said, Elena, there is something very special in this. You have to do this again. And moms and dads, wow, what have you done with my daughter?
The kids got the bug that Victoria got the first time.
Yes, they were like, they just keep like, my daughter just wouldn't stop coding. She like keeps programming every day. It's been like 4 weeks now. She's doing JavaScript now. I'm like, I don't even know what it is, but whatever. I'm glad your kid is inspired, but I'm not doing this again. And then, kids, the older ones, they were like, oh, we really wished school was like this. So the feedback was phenomenal. And I was thinking about it and I thought, you know what, I'll try it again. And then I just got hooked. and then another one. And every time I was doing this, I was exhausted. Like literally even last weekend, I was in Madrid working with kids from Red Cross. And on Monday, I just want to hide because there is just so much for me to deal with. Everyone wants to talk to you. Everyone wants to thank you because it's not just the kids who benefit. Yeah. It's also the mentors. And there was so much, and I'm like, this should be happening in every school. Like I shouldn't be doing this one in one city, one in another city. This really should be integrated into school systems. That's how schools should run. Like hackathons, it's based on problem solving. It's based on project. And it's kind of took me a while to realize, that there were some other fundamental issues in tech with diversity that we're experiencing with less than, 20% or 22% of women in AI, which I found much later, which I was really shocked about. Less than 14% of female researchers in AI. And at the VC level, only 2% of women overall in general receive VC funding, which is, I thought, something is wrong. Something is so terribly wrong at the level of diversity and just in general. It's unfair on women. It's unfair on other, diverse groups, whether it's ethnic groups or not. And I'm like, something needs to happen to change this. And so what I see, the way we are with teens in AI, we are not just teaching AI and ethics and everything else. We are almost unlocking that agency because they think they're just kids who are coming in to learn, but there is so much more going on. Sometimes at the levels that they don't realize that there are these building blocks that I am adding into that mind, that foundation that I'm building in a way, hoping that they will just be better humans in the age of AI. How ironic is that, right? So people think, oh, Elena's just teaching like coding and AI. But it's not just those hard skills, it's the soft skills, but it's also what happens to these kids afterwards.
So and because you're nurturing the natural intelligence through the artificial one.
Exactly. And not very many people recognize it. They think, oh, my kid is just going to go and build a project or learn how to code. And then they're like, wow, my kid is actually, he reached out to some charity and he offered himself to build the website. What happened? Like, Elena, there's something interesting happening with all these kids. And that's how we got our first client, MasterCard, because his kid was just coming to our hackathons. And I don't really ask, like, where does your parent work? Where does mom and dad, what do mom and dad do? But sometimes a parent walks in who apparently is some high-profile person in Accenture or MasterCard or Capgemini, and they're like, my kid really loved it. My daughter loves it. What can us as a company do? And I'm like, well, there's plenty for you to do. You could definitely, help us grow as a company, and there is so much we can do together. So that's how we grew from one cash sponsor, MasterCard, to many more. Microsoft joined, then JP Morgan, then, HSBC, then Google, then DeepMind, then Capgemini, now Sage, and
it's amazing.
And it was super incredible to do this. Yeah.
What is Teens and AI now, and what is it going to be in future?
Well, right now we are sitting at 15,000 young people across the world. And to me, this is still a pretty small number. A lot of people get impressed, but I'm like, no, I want it to be 150,000. I want it to be 1 million. So, so I'm kind of, at the moment, we're sitting at that. We have a number of corporate companies who are supporting us. One of them is Beiersdorf, a Nivea company. They're better known for the creams, but not as a mother company. And I know they're very, very passionate about impacting young people's lives, and not your typical school kids, but Red Cross or, SOS Children's Village, children who really have suffered for whatever reason, whether it's war or domestic violence or something else. So it's really close to my heart. I really want to reach those kids. So to be able to impact them in a way that they don't really know how, but in the future it kind of all shows somehow how I was inspired when I was a child, interacting with some really interesting minds around me. So hopefully by making those interactions happen between them and mentors, something else will happen as well. And of course it impacts the mentors as well, because I think they think, I'm just going to go in and mentor, but really they learn as well. It's almost like a learning and development opportunity for them. And at government level, of course, once they understand the value of a program like this in schools, a lot of transformation happens. We've got a great case study from Brunei where teachers are teaching our innovation framework 3 times a year, over 12 weeks. And they start with a challenge. They teach, what we would normally have in our framework, design thinking and ethics and technologies and pitching. And then towards the end of the 12 weeks, they have this amazing project that kids are building. And imagine you do this 2 or 3 times a year. Your kids are changed just by virtue of doing that.
That's amazing. Any plans to expand what you're doing now to Uzbekistan?
That would be a dream. I mean, I'm still planning my trip. My mum did come over with dad a while ago, just before COVID. And then after COVID, it just became logistically difficult during COVID. And then after that, we somehow grew so fast that I think in my mind, I didn't have the time to plan anything. But this year, I definitely would love to go. We have got a lot of kids from Kazakhstan joining us. So we definitely have some sort of, the market has already been penetrated in Central Asia. But in Uzbekistan, not yet. We've had some kids from Uzbekistan joining us in London. I know your daughter benefited from this as well. So, but I'm hoping if somebody watches the podcast and it resonates with them and they feel like, wow, this work could be so impactful in Uzbekistan, I would certainly be up for designing something that could be so fitting in schools, whether it's primary or secondary, because we have programs which are completely beginner-friendly, where you don't need to code. It just unlocks the why and the kind of the reason for the project to exist, I suppose, and they could definitely find some really interesting problems to tackle in Uzbekistan or in their families and communities. And then we have programs for all the kids which are focused on entrepreneurship, but also AI and ethics and technologies. And we do see this really helps them get into top universities. So we have kids going to Yale, Harvard, Edinburgh, Oxford, Cambridge, Bath University, Bristol or whatnot. So we have some really great traction with kids knowing that if they complete a program like this, that it will definitely help them get into university. We don't maybe advertise it well enough, as somebody told me recently, Elena, you should mention all these universities. I'm like, yeah, we probably should. I only have 8 people in my team. But we will get there. So it would be amazing to do something in Uzbekistan. I would love to do something at government level, because I'm kind of ready to bring something that will ensure systemic change. I definitely would love to see myself changing systems, education systems, where it can be seen and be done in a more fun, engaging way. In a way where kids leave education knowing what their purpose in life is. Because right now I feel education is very purposeless. It's not only in the UK, it's really everywhere, which I find a really sad phenomenon to see. Because I think in the depth of my heart, I probably am more of an educator first and foremost, because I've got a lot of kids who come back to me many, many years later telling me how impactful that program was for them. So I feel like I've influenced enough lives to know that if it wasn't for that program, I really would know where they would end up, and whether their life would be as purposeful as it is right now. So it's a dream to do something in Uzbekistan, and of course with languages, everything is at the moment in English. We're releasing some programs in Spanish, French and German, just because we're working with in those countries right now. In Uzbekistan, I wouldn't know who to talk to yet, but it would be amazing. Yeah,
there is a significant focus on IT.
Yeah.
The Ministry of IT is quite active. We have an amazing IT park that is actually promoting itself around the world and trying to attract the talent. So I'm sure, hopefully, this podcast will be kind of a reason as well for them to and you to collaborate and have amazing things in Uzbekistan as well. Speaking of AI, I was thinking of doing something. It's an experiment.
Oh, go for it. Hit me with that.
I want an AI actually ask you a question.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
One question. How would you feel about that?
I'm totally cool. Yes. Let's try that.
Let's try it. I'm recording a podcast with an AI entrepreneur and ethicist. I want you to ask one question to her about the future of AI.
That's exciting. How about this question? What are the most critical ethical considerations we should address now to ensure AI development benefits humanity in the future?
That is a pretty good question.
That's it.
I actually talk about this question a lot on the panel. Do we have time?
That might be an issue.
Yes, this is actually a topic I'm really passionate about, and I speak about it a lot. I write about it. There are some really critical concerns at the moment in the space of AI that all of us ethicists are concerned about, and that's obviously a lack of regulation. It's very, very
the black box.
Yeah, it's a massive issue, because of course there are companies like OpenAI who are releasing stuff without anyone being able to regulate them yet. The latest scandal, I think you probably would have heard about Scarlett Johansson. The voice that Sam Altman decided to integrate or implement within one of the voice systems called Sky in the latest iteration of the product. And of course, Scarlett Johansson immediately recognized that it was her voice. He did approach her, asked her, she said no, and he still did this. So there is a massive issue of consent. There are massive issues of IP, whose data are we using to train our models. So that's highly, highly important, because of course there are so many artists like yourself who are putting stuff on YouTube, who are putting stuff on the internet, and then there are companies like OpenAI who would then be assuming that because your video is on YouTube, that it's
a public domain.
It's a public domain, as the CTO has said. And she said, well, we're training this on publicly available data. Whether you have given her consent to use this podcast video or other videos that you've created is a different matter. I don't think they really care. And this is kind of where we have an issue with that. So somebody like me, I make sure that our teenagers who are building AI, who will eventually be building those future AI systems, and who are already building various models, they are aware of some of the risks and implications of what they could build and harms it could potentially create for the society. Of course, we have some systems still that don't recognize certain tones of skin color. So we have facial recognition systems that we really have to, I think there was a moratorium on to ban all the facial recognition systems until they prove to be ethical. So we're kind of trying to create this almost like a stamp of approval. Like, you know, when you buy organic eggs, you can see, okay, this was organic, this was in some farm, and we know that they're safe to eat. So how do we know the technologies we're using are safe to use?
Ethically sourced data.
Ethically sourced data is one thing, and there is a whole load of stuff that was recently uncovered with data, you know, being labeled by people in Africa, being paid very, very little for it. And some of this stuff is very traumatic for them to see and label as well, because there could be pornographic material, there could be some sexual abuse there as well. So they're being paid to watch this, to label, to make sure this. So it's a very, very murky, very controversial space to watch. I definitely recommend that people do become sort of educated and aware of what's happening, because it will definitely be integrated in every area of our life, whether it's health, whether it's education. So wherever you work, this will most likely be used. Some form of AI will definitely be coming into fore there. So it's super important that we're aware of some of those risks, and also be careful what you put on the internet, because I have spoken to some artists who no longer want to display their art on the internet just because they're worried what if some model will be scraping their data set and using this data for some use that they may not have authorized. So it's quite controversial.
Yeah. Well, the topic of AI is very big, as you said. I think we need to set another podcast, another episode for that
will have
discuss
to be another.
all of the nuances of it. But unfortunately, our time is limited. Elena, we have a few traditions in our podcast. One tradition is we ask every guest to recommend one book to our audience and why you would recommend that book.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll bring up a book from my childhood. So obviously these days there is just so much on self-development and whatnot. So there will be a lot of other guests who will probably mention some really cool books. I'm definitely not recommending any AI books. But I'll recommend one book. It's called Gadfly by Atel Lilian Voynich. So in Russian, it's Ovid.
Ovid.
And it's a really interesting book. I read it a couple of times when I was a child. And I think the reason why I love it so much and I keep going back to it is because it is about revolution. It's about standing for what matters in life. And it's about not giving up. So it's that spirit, that sort of, that I feel that is so important, and that energy, if you like, that is so important in our days, to really stand up for what matters and uncover that agency within yourself. Be a revolutionary, be a pirate, do something that you won't regret, something that will make a lasting difference, and something that will help others remember you for, so that when you are, you know, living your very last days, you don't regret those moments of you not doing something that was so important for you or for the world back then.
That's a great recommendation. We will try to find the book and put the link to the book in our descriptions. Another tradition we have is the free microphone. It's where you have the direct time with the audience. This is the camera you need to talk to, and you're free to talk about anything. I will not interrupt you. You can promote, you can whatever you want.
All right. I think I will probably focus on things that I could probably do in Uzbekistan back home. So it would be an absolute dream. So I'm just verbalizing this into the universe in the hope that somebody watching will understand the value I can bring back to Uzbekistan. I have been abroad for many years, learned a lot of things, been on quite a journey. go back and do something. And so if you are listening and if you know of someone who perhaps works at, I don't know, Ministry of Education or IT, I don't know what kind of ministries we have, but if there is a way to bring something like a pilot or bring some of our programs into curriculum, that would be a dream, because I know they're highly impactful, and I would very much love our kids in Uzbekistan to experience what a lot of other kids around the world are experiencing by just virtue of participating in programs like this. It only takes a couple of days to inspire a child to do something amazing in the world, and I want that experience to be delivered in Uzbekistan as well. So yeah, so if you are, if you are connected with anyone or know of someone, because I'm kind of a little bit out of the loop, so to speak, I don't really know very many people anymore. I know a lot more people here in London and so many other parts of the world, just not back in Uzbekistan. So if there is an opportunity, I would welcome that.
We'll make sure that someone from the relevant ministries will get this message, Elena. Thanks a lot.
Amazing.
The last tradition is the question from the previous guest.
Oh, yeah.
So what we do is we ask every guest to leave a question to the following one, and they answer the question that was asked before them as well. They don't know who the next guest is, and you don't know who the previous one. So the question that the previous guest asked was, what was one best highlight from your university years?
That's a funny one. From my university years, I have very limited experience, as you know. I've not been a massive student, so to speak. I don't really do what usually other students do. I just go and find jobs whilst everyone else studies. So my highlight at university, I guess, meeting some really interesting professors. I'm just going to be boring like that just because growing up in Uzbekistan, and that was my only sort of early interaction with university systems, I felt like the people who were teaching me really knew what they were doing, and I was just fortunate to be surrounded by people who've traveled the world and done something impactful, and they had a chance to also teach us some of the really interesting things related to business management. I was kind of doing more business management on the job, but that university experience was quite interesting. And I know my mom always regrets that I never finished it, but hopefully, everything adds up, and that experience was quite profound. And of course, my university experience in London was also interesting, but again, I was more interested in the extracurricular part of it. So being part of the King's College Entrepreneurship Society felt like was more my fit than sitting in lectures. I guess at that time I was also a mom with a child I had to breastfeed. So my son was super young, so I used to bring him to my university doing my master's degree and have him with me. So it was every day was an experience, I would say.
That's a good response.
So
Elena, thanks a lot for doing this. Thanks a lot for sharing your story. It is very inspirational. I'm sure that a lot of people will be inspired by what you have done, what you're doing right now, and your ambitions going forward. Where can people find out more about you and what you're doing and about Teens in AI?
LinkedIn is always the best place to find me. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. But of course, our website, www.teensinai.com, has got a lot of information. We've just launched AI adventure courses. So these are your self-paced learning courses. So anyone from anywhere in the world, whether you're based in Uzbekistan or any part of Africa or Asia or wherever, or here in London, can access that course. Some are free, some are premium, but a lot of the beginner material, which is how we inspire kids, is very accessible and very free. And of course, in the summer, we're running our AI for Good incubator. So maybe somebody from our community from Uzbekistan have attended. I cannot remember, because we've been running this for, I think, 7 or 8 years now. But it's, again, a really impactful program. It runs for 5 days, 9 to 5. We're going to give you the life of an entrepreneur. And not just an entrepreneur, it will be a social entrepreneur. So you'll be tackling something related to climate action. So we have some really cool challenges and some very interesting subject matter experts that are joining to inspire you. Sage will be supporting this program with mentors, and there will be a few other corporate companies joining us like Amazon. So your kids will definitely have the experience of their lifetime, and and hopefully that will unlock something amazing with in them as well.
That sounds
so that's
like
kind of coming up.
Great opportunity for the kids, especially in summer when they have free time. We will put the links again to all of the Yelena's profile and Teens and AI and all of the activities happening around it, so that you can go and sign up. And Yelena, thanks a lot again for coming, for sharing your time, your story with us. And I hope that the conversation will continue and we will have you again as a guest in future episodes.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to that. And thank you so much for having me.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. That was really good.
Yeah, is it okay?
I'll tell you something. Today is actually my birthday.
Oh my God.